Hello, everyone. I am not making a philosophical statement with the title of this video. It's just a reflection of the fact that it is Friday and the work week is over for me, more or less. I actually on the clock for 19 more minutes, but we're done. But I feel that it is the time to have more conversations about things. Luke had a really good stream this morning that I missed, but I watched it and left comments afterward. And that, if anybody saw that, that could certainly be a topic to be discussed or anything else. But I will post a link and see if anybody wants to talk. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Luke's talk was about disentangling the ethnic elements from Orthodoxy in America, and the difference of being in America. And I have been thinking about how some of that, those ethnic elements or whatever, do sometimes play a little bit of a role. Our corner has some amount of diversity, but not a tremendous amount. Certainly, there are other perspectives. As an example, my church, my pastor is African American. There are many African Americans at my church, many Hispanics in our church. In fact, the city in which I live is predominantly Hispanic. And I don't see quite this same desire to return to the old paths in those communities. Maybe there is some for the Hispanics. They maybe would want to return to Catholicism, but for the most part, most of them that are there have left recently themselves or within one or two generations. They still have many Catholic relatives. The cultural aspect's still there, and I would say it's not a culture of intense devotion, at least in the day-to-day life. They may take the church part of it seriously, but it's still like at most once a week, maybe just a few times a year event. And so they would have a serious respect for that, reverence for that, but it's not a huge part of their life. As for the Black Christians that I know, there's no their historical roots go back to the slave trade, and emancipation is a more probably the most meaningful point of historical significance in their kind of understanding, unless if they want to, there's certainly a large number of African Americans that try to connect with their roots in Africa and things like that. But if you're a Christian, there's not that much, except for there is the Ethiopic church, but that's a very specific part of Africa, and most of the people here, I don't think, can trace back their roots to Ethiopia. So it's an interesting thing how, so in that sense, the appeal of something like Orthodoxy or Catholicism or Anglicanism even, or any of these things they're the Black Protestant churches that kind of come up after the Civil War, that is their historical church, and it's just new. They're essentially they were a newly evangelized population. Many of them were Christians while they were in slavery, but once they had the freedom to establish their own churches, it was that's the genesis of their historical Christianity. So it's not and it's here. It's native to here. So in some sense, you could think about like maybe that's one of the more original churches to our continent and our nation. So maybe if you're an American, you should be considering that as an option if you're looking for something with roots. Um, but there is this whole immigrant aspect to our nation, so everybody traces their lineage back somewhere overseas, unless if they're a Native American, and then and that's in that instance it's kind of the same thing. It's like, well, you can return to paganism as your roots, but if you are a Christian, how do you connect to the roots? Oh yes, New Amsterdam, in I guess that's on the island of Manhattan. The Dutch, yeah, it is interesting. Like the Dutch really do have one of the oldest claims to historical legitimacy here in the New World, and temperamentally, in a lot of ways, hey, if I had my choice, that's probably where I would go. Although I do like credo baptism, so but that's just my preference, I guess. I wasn't prepared to monologue so much. I guess I'll have to think up something to say. I started to watch a video earlier today. Well, I did watch a video earlier today. The algorithm provided me with this natural theologian guy who I discovered the connection probably is that Ross Bird, who talked to Paul and talked to some other people, was on his channel like a year ago. And I didn't watch that conversation, but I don't know how to use YouTube on the desktop. I'm trying to find the thing where you can share your screen. There's my history. Okay. All right. So let me see. I'll put the screen here. Mm-hmm. So this guy here, I watched this video. He's forgetting Calvinism and becoming a 5-point Zwinglian. Then when I looked at his channel, so that's when I saw, he had talked to Ross Bird like a while ago, and then I started watching this video on presuppositionalism because it's very interesting because I could tell that he definitely had a experience in a certain style of Calvinism. What he talks about like a Calvinist vibe, and I was definitely thinking like, oh yeah, that's the vibe of the Calvinism that I don't like as much. And it's very interesting because the CRC actually takes a different branch. So he went to Westminster Seminary, which is the place of Cornelius Van Til and presuppositional apologetics. And Van Til gets his inspiration from Kuyper, but Dooyeweerd also got his inspiration for Kuyper, and he is much more popular in the Dutch churches, the Christian Reformed Church. Of course, Van Til is Dutch, but he's joins the OPC or whatever, founds that Orthodox Presbyterian church with the other guy. Anyway, it's interesting because I had this same conversation with CW about how Van Tilian presuppositionalism basically makes it so you can't trust anything that's not Christian, but then it turns into really you can't trust anything that's not Calvinist and not like a very particular version of Calvinism. And then it just turns into this weird little recursive circle of like self-referential um, suspicion. And then consequentially, it makes people, whenever they get frustrated with it, they say, what is the opposite of this? It's that Thomas Aquinas that everybody told me never to read or listen to. And then they go right to Thomas Aquinas. And then they become, Thomists or whatever. So it's just an interesting thing. Whereas, because basically Van Til makes it so you can only ever trust other Van Tillian presuppositionalist Calvinists. Whereas I think Dooyeweerd has a framework where you can say that the Calvinist frame is the best, but there is truth and knowledge to be discerned in everybody from Thomas Aquinas to the pagans. You just have to take the time and effort to discern what that truth is by comparing it to Scripture, and that's a much more TLCE kind of a vibe. So I think that's why it's better. And really, it was that great book that Phlebas shared with me. Here we go. Thank you, Phlebas. This is a very excellent summary of what it took me 800 pages to more or less figure it out. Really great book on the Creation Regained, Biblical Basics for a Reformational Worldview. It's really good. And then I told my wife, because she's in charge of such things at our church, she asked me what book all of the graduating seniors should get as a gift from the church to go embark into adulthood. And this is the book that I said they should get. So 5 evangelical high school graduates are now going to be influenced by reformational thinking, which I think is a pretty good thing overall. Yeah. And, I'll just connect it. I'll just connect it to the other things. So this is, okay, I guess this is going to be a stream a little bit about reformational worldview and presuppositional apologetics and all that stuff. So there's a lot of discussion. Obviously, this thing with Jonathan Peugeot that came up, Luke talked about this a little bit in his stream, where he's standing in this blue mosque that's inspired by the Hagia Sophia, and he's saying that, if megachurch Christianity was the only version that existed, I would be tempted to join this, because the mosque has beauty and all that, and everybody, is going on about the beauty and whatnot of the architecture, and then dunking on the mega churches with their fog machines and their electric guitars. I have many electric guitars. I'm a real mega church guitarist. And the idea is that there's just no basis to this world, there's no foundational reason why these churches can or do embrace these things other than the fact that it's like popular in the current culture. And that's just not true. But if we take a step back and examine like what is the nature of like the high arts versus the low arts, kind of like you have the high church and the low church, and the high church is much more closely associated with the high arts, architecture, fine painting, sculpture, all the Renaissance stuff. Whereas, and for music, that's a very Protestant thing. The Lutherans are the great composers, Bach and all that. So Um, you know, so that's a very high art, but coming out of the high church Protestant tradition. And then the low church has all this folk art and stuff like that. Well, all the folk art, all the high art started out as folk art, I think. I think you could say. And then it just, got rubber stamped by the state as like important enough to receive government subsidies. And so then you have these like massive building projects. But and then because it was built on a grand imperial scale, everybody thinks it's important, and then it's sophisticated. And so then you get to be Jonathan Pajot and um, talk about how beautiful and wonderful fancy cathedrals and mosques are, as opposed to evangelical churches. Well, at the same time, they want to criticize the music by saying that it's all like manipulation and techne and all that stuff. Overlooking the fact that a great degree of techne goes into crafting the cathedral as well. And that's not to say. So what I want to say is that the position that I stand in, coming from a reformational worldview, actually I think is the most coherent view, because it can affirm all of those things as good things, containing elements of truth and beauty that bring glory to God. Here's the other author here, Hans R. Rookmaaker, Art Needs No Justification. This is an exceptional book. It really he talks about how there's sort of a split that happens in the Renaissance time between more or less the craftsman and the artist, which created this kind of category of the artist as like a an individual genius who was the producer of the vision, which then gets really out of control once you get into all that kind of Enlightenment stuff. And like that's why you have modern art and stuff, because everybody assumes that the art, like the creativity, comes from the artist himself. And then once you remove all the religious and philosophical underpinnings for like what it means to be human, the artists are just lost to sea trying to figure out how to make and convey meaning. They can't, there's no subject to their thing. And so of course this is something Jonathan Pajot talks about, and why it's good to go back to the ancient church traditions and all that, and they did have a vision for that stuff. But I think a lot of that stuff was more intuitively grasped than fully explored. And so Hans Rookmaaker talks about how originally it was the person who like built the house and did the ornamentation and the the functional elements. There was no differentiation between the functional elements of a chair you would sit on, a house you live in, and the pieces of art, like paintings and stuff like that. They were connected. They served each other. Like in a cathedral, you have the building itself and you have its ornamentation, and they're supposed to give you a coherent picture. But he really puts it in like the Renaissance, which is in the world of Catholicism, really, when those things kind of split, and you kind of have the dawn of the artist as a category. But the interesting thing about Rookmaaker too is he's an art historian, so he knows all about the stuff from the Greek classical all through the Renaissance and the Middle Ages and up to the modern day, and he examines it all. And he can see there's the problems where it's humanity's trying to glorify itself through this art, but then elements of truth and beauty still come through, because we are made in the image of God. But there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect when you think between when you try to do something to the glory of God and when you try to do something for your own glory and it backfires. Rookmaaker, he is, and so this is another book he wrote. He's an art historian. He was a great friend of Francis Schaeffer, really informed his views on art. Burn Power has several lectures featuring Hans Rookmaaker on his channel. They're very good. I recommend them. But this is another interesting book he read. I haven't read much of it, but I've read some of it. I was actually going through, and then I was making a playlist on Spotify. Every time he would mention a song, I would try to look it up and listen to it, because obviously it's a book about music, so that enhances the experience. But it's very interesting because, he comes from, you could say, he's a very educated man. Yeah, yeah. Schaeffer's art in the Bible, like, so he and Rookmaaker, like, the first time they met, they like had like a 7-hour conversation, and then they were best friends, and he really informed him a lot about art stuff. Because Schaeffer, and this actually goes back to the beginning part, because Schaeffer came from Westminster Seminary. He was a student of Van Til, and he was curious about art, but the worldview that he was presented with didn't really have room for it. He didn't really like what do they do with it. And I think really the problem is that Cornelius Van Til was just the wrong guy to put in charge of like crafting a Christian worldview, because the only things he actually liked were philosophy and theology, and so he just didn't have any interest in other things. He didn't think they were important or whatever. He didn't talk about them. So in theory, his worldview would have had no problem with answering questions about art and music, but because he wasn't personally interested in it, and he taught at a seminary where people were primarily concerned with learning about theology, it wasn't a concern of most of those students either, and so it just never got brought up. But then when you go over to Europe and you have Rookmaaker, who introduced Schaeffer to Dooyeweerd. I'm not going to try to learn to be good at pronouncing Dutch, but okay, there we go. There's the Dooyeweerd books. Twilight of Western Thought and Roots of Western Culture. And apparently you can get all of these for free online. But he had a similar kind of philosophy, but it was to what Van Til was teaching, but it was much more well-rounded, and it really more encompasses, all of creation. And so, and as I would point back to, I had it on the little screen. So this is the book. Everybody should check out this book. This is a great book. Creation Regained, Biblical Basics for a Reformational Worldview. It's pretty skinny. It just makes you feel like good, nice, and hopeful about the future. And like, there's so much of the world that's yet to be discovered, and Christians should be really joyful and excited about discovering that stuff. A little bit of the same problem here, where it's like the only people that talk about this stuff on a personal level, all they're really interested in is the Bible. So that's kind of, they need to talk about more other things. And that's where this book is really interesting, because it's about jazz, blues, and spirituals, which is, a folk kind of music. It's not super sophisticated. I'm going to pause this for a second. All right. So this is the first thing. Like, he's doing the work. He's going beyond the theoretical into the actual work. And of course the spirituals, the black songs that the slaves sung, like, they are spiritual. So there's an obvious connection to the Bible there. But then, he goes into jazz and blues and stuff like that, and he's saying like, hey, there's something good in these things, and that's what to be explored. And Michael is here. Hello. Okay. Well, anyway, so that's what I did in my book, or tried to do. It started with things like carpentry, and then, hey, I put stuff about like emo music in there, professional wrestling, uh, and economics and all this stuff. So I mean, really, the whole point is that if there's anything that's in creation that exists, in some sense, there's something about it that by learning about that, we can learn something about God, and we should be able to connect it in some way to the Bible. So it's a very freeing worldview when it comes to things like art and aesthetics. Michael, how are you?
Good, sir. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, it's been an interesting conversation the last few days through multiple channels.
Yeah. Did you watch Luke's talk today?
I did. I did. I did.
Yeah.
Uh, I think there's a lot of entry points to this conversation, and I'm happy to dig in if you want to.
Well, sure. I mean, I don't really have like a I mean, like this is the thing. Like, I go into these conversations online, and like really because I'm exploring it, but like because this is kind of the foundation that I came out of this sort of reformational worldview. Like, I feel like I have a very secure anchor to explore things, but
Sure.
sometimes it comes across in a trolling way. Or I'm pushing people on some of their presuppositions or whatever. But
Well, hey, I tell people all the time, like the corner, like whatever you want to call it, but what we commonly point at with the corner
yeah,
is PvP grounds, right? These are collisions of worldviews,
yeah,
and it's beautiful to me, like and I think that it seems to be shared with a lot of folks here because it's like super low in agreeableness, super high in openness. So this is our playground. Um, and so we're able to do it, with respect, uh, but with like coming with a lot of openness too,
yeah,
Anyway, um, I remember, there's this little book club thing that I'd been hanging out with one of the Orthodox guys that I landed that like kind of took me in a little bit when I first landed at the parish that I'm at. He'd been trying to build bridges, and so he had this book club that he was a part of. Um, you know, mostly Catholic, like a little bit of Orthodox, a handful of Protestants. Um, and I was talking with one of the Catholic guys there, and there was this conversation that we had where he started to sort of defend Western art in a way. Like I don't even know how the conversation got there. It wasn't terribly deliberate, but I think it became like sort of a Catholic Western art thing versus Orthodox iconography.
mm,
So he's going on about like the beauty of and like the technique and whatever he was doing to Steelman, the beauty of this stuff. And I grew up with a bit of an artistic bent. Um, I was just drawing all the time. I was obsessed with comics and stuff. And one of the things in coming into the Orthodox lineage is like what stood out to me. Part of what has stood out to me is that like Orthodox iconography, or this Eastern Christian iconography, is maximized for theological meaning. It's not maximized for beauty
mm-hmm,
necessarily. It tries to find the convergence between uh, I guess a lot of things, but it's a logos guiding indicator of all the most important things. Here's the most important materials. Here's the most important. I'm saying like theological, but I mean that in the deepest sense. Like when
yeah,
I break that word apart, it's sort of like the logos orientation towards truth of theos, right? And so it's like it's trying to hit this, and so like in a stupid way, like I look at anime and I look at comic books I grew up with, and I go, something similar happens there, where they're not going full blown Alex Ross Kingdom Come realism. They're maximizing for like meaning and scene and this dramatic output, and there's I see something similar, but maybe at its highest form happen in this iconography. And so when when I'm talking to this Roman Catholic guy, this is the kind of point that I'm trying to make to him, right? Probably not in so many words, but where it's not beauty in that Western sense that he was trying to defend. It's all that convergence of meaning and importance and logos.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's like I made a point a long time ago or something, like, the whole thing of like goodness, truth, and beauty.
Mm-hmm.
It is like a you can't disambiguate those things. I mean, like you can try, you can contrast certain elements of them or whatever, but anything that that lacks any of those is not beauty. Without truth,
Mm-hmm.
or without goodness is not real beauty. Truth that doesn't have goodness or beauty is that's like nihilism. It's just harshness with no hope. And yes, you say the thing goodness without truth and beauty, it's just platitudes or whatever. So anything that really is good, true, or beautiful has to be rooted or connected to the other two. And and so obviously the iconography and stuff does have a probably I would say balanced, pretty balanced expression of those. It is interesting the way like obviously once people started painting super like realistic, that was what Schaeffer says is that it was actually reflecting the fact that people it reflected a shift in the way that people were perceiving reality, which was a true perception. Because because maybe before that it's like, and maybe even the early church was sort of thinking in that kind of weird hazy, I don't know, it's like, I guess it's if you think about how like a seed takes everything's in the seed, but you don't see the fullest expression until it becomes a tree, and even a tree that bears fruit. So when you're in the halfway stages, like the various elements are still like more mixed together. And you have that in like the pagan world, where it's like, okay, the gods are like people, but then they are also connected to these sort of objects in the sky and the sort of spiritual things that drive the emotions. And it's all like mushed together. And so I think Christianity is part of the thing that starts letting those things branch out. And the iconography obviously is it doesn't continue to progress as along those
keep in mind about what happens with that Christian iconography is, think about like the super high art from the Roman Empire at the time.
Yeah.
Right. And so here's this like hyper realism. Here's these statues. Like, I mean, it is gorgeous and technically, like it's so superior that there's a lot of cases where we're just like, we genuinely don't know how they were doing it, right, to this day. And so there, in a way, there's a revolt against that from the Christian perspective, right, where we go, what should be held in the temple can't be that. This misses the point. This goes too far in certain directions, right? And instead, there has to be, like what we notice with man, right, is that if you start sculpting it, this is me just really freewheeling here a little bit, right? But if it like becomes like a statue thing, right, then there could be some danger in that. Like we've seen what happened to the Greeks, we've seen what happened to the Romans, right, and then this pagan evolution. I mean, gosh, you go to Nashville at the Parthenon that they recreated, and you see this huge statue of Athena, right? Because for them, it was like they have the way that they thought about it, to the best of my understanding, is we have manifested the intersection of the invisible and the invisible, and here's a real hypostasis of Athena.
Yeah.
Right? And so the Christians go, nope, right? Like,
right.
Clearly that path seems to take you here. Here's a lesson learned, right? And so like here's these catacombs, right? And they're like, all right, you have to maximize for, people will say the terms like, here's a portal. They say portal. People get all hyped up about that. Gavin Newsom gets all crazy about it. But here's a portal to the heavens, right? Well, it's like, what the hell do you mean? Right. Well, it's something like a representation of the invisible, in so much as it can be represented in a way that doesn't trail you off into a path that is consequential in a law of death, right? Because we saw exactly how that turned out with these pagan statues, right? And so there's like a learning over time. So they're taking these lessons learned from, okay, here were symbols, and here's like certain techne that was used, right, that could be integrated and would orient you towards Christ. It would east you, sun you, point you towards Christ, right? And so whatever technique is going to be used, liturgically, because they're inheriting, from like a branch of Pharisaism, right? So whatever technique can be used, they were too freaked out on from these various branches that were active Judaism to a point where they didn't recognize the Son of Man when he was right in front of them, right? But you can't go too far in the other direction with the Greek pagans either. And so there's a fullness that's above, right? But even that we have to watch and be mindful of, right? And so it's like, burn the chaff, take the wheat, right? And figure out what kind of techne is appropriate, right? That can be used to orient you towards Christ.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, so I think there is a sort of, I mean, I even think, Paul's, like, it's so interesting because, when people, there are, like, there's obviously differences in the different churches because the cultural differences of each of those places were so diverse that Paul had to give different wisdom and instruction to the different bodies. They were struggling with different things, and so it's like, to the church in Corinth, where he's basically like telling them, "You guys cool your jets on all the the sex stuff. Like maybe you guys just need to like cut it out." My sense is that was a very contextual message, or it's definitely best understood in that is like the hyper sexualized setting. Like, and if people are coming out of that, as many people are now, like maybe just taking marriage and relationships and all that stuff off the table is like the best step. especially like I'm thinking like for a new believer, and then it's like once you figure out who you are in Christ and stuff, then you can approach those things, and then you're approaching it in a way where okay, yeah, you do it in marriage. We don't do prostitutes anymore. None of this stuff with your father's wife or whatever, whatever was going on in there, and so it's like, well, it's like the wilderness, it's like the Israelites have to go through the wilderness. They need to be in that wilderness for a time, which happens to, which ended up having to be for a generational change. But, even still, there's other times where God brings someone into the wilderness because they need to more or less sort out like everything that they've learned before, because I think if you look at Moses, it's like Moses had 40 years in Egypt, and then he had 40 years with Jethro in the desert there, and then it's his like the wisdom that he gets from both of those is what he needs to properly lead the Israelites out and into the promised land. I'm getting a phone call, but I'm gonna.
So I'll ramble a little bit while you get the phone call. The way that we would see it, or at least what strikes me about the wilderness, is that that's exactly what especially the pagans are going through at the time, right? Rather than like you're in the church and now there's wilderness, it's what you're coming from is the wilderness, right? And now you're gathering into the temple. And so it's like a multiplicity and then a unity thing. And what to me hopefully would be emphasized with the churches, the ecclesias, it's one ecclesia and here's these points, right? It's not that all these churches are different, it's that they're being brought into all the same thing. Paul's bringing, the Pharisaical tradition in its fullness and helping them, establish all of these locations, right? So they're doing their best to try to set these things up, but depending on where they're at, they have some degree of influence. Like some further out in Rome, right, with a bunch of Latin speakers, they ran into a situation where they'd cast out all the Jews at one point. So it's only a bunch of Gentiles that are hanging out over in Rome trying to do their best. They're really disconnected from any of the Pharisaical tradition, right? They're really disconnected from it. Because the idea was like, the Pharisees have the right scripture, they have the right temple, they're hypocrites, right? So then what happens is Paul remains a Pharisee his whole life, right? But becomes a fully filled Pharisee, right? With obedience towards Christ. So especially over in the East, right? Antioch, Corinth, Alexandria. So what's happening at these locations is it's like, oh, okay. Not one temple, localized temple, also you as temple, right? And the liturgy has to be transformed towards Messiah, but we are also still inheriting, something that's good. There's wheat here and there's chaff, right? So they got to burn away the chaff, the things that have been a problem, and part of that is including like, especially on the Jewish side, they're like freaked out about writing. They're freaked out about writing. They're freaked out about art, right? They want like a war king, and there's a whole bunch of things that have to burn away, but they have to bring the wheat over and transform this thing.
I missed a little bit in the middle while I was on the phone, but
no worries. So the biggest thing I want to point out from what I was saying in the beginning was not the diversity of the churches, but the unity, right? So they were in the wilderness during their, like the God-fearers or the Gentiles, they were in the wilderness during the pagan days. That was the wilderness, right? but the smoke and the fire by night, right, was guiding them into a unity, into one place. And so when they enter the church, here's one place, one evangelion, right? Paul's very insistent about this, right? There's one. There's one gospel. If he ever comes back and he gives you a different evangelion, he's wrong, right? So they're brought up into a unity. That's not to discount that there are cultural differences in the world that they're in, but they're called to be apart from the world, even though they're in it.
Yeah. So obviously the unity is important. The problem is, and this is not exclusive to Orthodox, it's across many traditions, including Protestants, well, especially like the fundamentalists. But there's a desire for looking for unity in the form of uniformity. And then when you have many competing views of that, you don't have unity. I mean, you might in some spiritual sense, but on the ground, people aren't talking to each other, or they're looking at each other with suspicion or whatever. So the solution to that problem is what I really like about that reformational worldview. Like I can't remember. There's somebody listen to one little lecture somebody had done on this book or whatever, and they were talking about how one of the main things he's trying to critique is like folk expressions of Christianity, where it's got like a really superstitious approach, and like, which in the in the fundamentalist sense is kind of like this thing of, you have some yardstick that you put like, do they dance, do they go to movies, do they chew gum, and that's the way by which you can verify like who's in or who's out, or or any of those things. Like, and it is kind of funny because it does seem like it's sort of, there's like timestamps for when churches start or when they maybe hit some point of development, and then it's like totally fine with like the stuff that was around before they came on the scene, but so suspicious to anything that comes after or that comes from a different culture or tradition. And so I guess kind of going back to the iconography or whatever, that's the thing, is that in like it's good to have something where you can reduce the amount of information so you can actually see what is the truth of it, or the particular truth of it, and then you can and then if you can see that it is, if those essential elements, the gospel that Jesus shared, is in that thing, then you can recognize it in its more fullest expression. Like the other thing I really like, just in general, is like Christian art from like lots of different cultures, where they make it look like the style of their culture. Like when you see Jesus and Mary and stuff, but they're like the Japanese Jesus and Mary. Like, I think that's really cool, especially the more different types of it you see, because the more different types of it you see like lots of different cultures that you recognize, but you see the same message, the same image, the same truth represented in it. So in that sense, it's like even the more expressions of it you see, the more clear the truth that's across all of them stands out.
What unifies them, I can see that, and that's good. The question becomes when the diversity goes too far, right? So, like, I watched this play out with iconography within the Orthodox Church, right? So somebody, Jonathan will talk about this sometimes. You go to some Orthodox churches and you'll notice these like really thin noses on the portraits, like like grotesquely thin noses, because someone caught like a theological significance about that, and then they over rotated on it. They went too far, and then it just kind of caught on, and people kept doing it and then refining it further and further until it's disfigured and unrecognizable, right? And so at some point, right, that will end up in death because it's missed the mark, it's gone too far, it's too far outside the target, and it has to be reoriented back towards the target. When we look at some of these, like you imagine Cyril and Methodius going north, right, and encountering the Rus, right. Now, at the time, they don't have a written language, right, and they may have just been sort of a wild pagan people of sorts. So you're muted.
I have to go to the other room, but I'm going to listen to what you're saying on my phone. So
Yeah, sure. So Cyril and Methodius, they go up north to these, what, as far as I know, are kind of a wild pagan people, and they're doing, this missionary work. They're evangelizing, and so they make friends. They make peace with these people, and they take the Greek and start trying to adapt it, and create this Cyrillic, right, in order to have them have a written language, and then begin to translate scripture, from especially New Testament. But they're really, for them, Greek is in wide use, including Hebrew texts. So they're taking old Hebrew scripture, it's like that's in Greek at this point, and certainly New Testament, Gospels, epistles, whatever, and helping translate it and bring this in. And so at the time, you can imagine that they land there. It's like, well, what kind of liturgics or temple could they possibly have at that point, right? And it's going to be really wild, so to say, right? Like, or immature. It just hasn't had an opportunity to mature yet. But with time, the inheritance gets brought in, maybe takes dozens, maybe hundreds of years, right? But it gets brought in, and it blooms and it matures, right? And so the iconography blooms, and things remain distinctive. They don't lose their identity, but they're grafted on, right? In this slow, intentional way. Because if you forced it on them, you just probably couldn't. You couldn't force it on them. You'd have some kind of other backlash with horrible consequences, but they get grafted in slowly into the main body. And I don't know how long to ramble, because I don't know how long you're going for here. But that's just to show my cards here a little bit. And I think this is the wider view from the Orthodox world of the Protestants, and which we talk about most of us talking about Protestants are like, we were Protestants, or like really close to that. This is our upbringing. We go, there is plenty of beauty here, and it's in an immature state, and there's all kinds of reasons why it's in the state that it's in, especially if you understand how the Western Church progresses. Going back all the way to Rome, where anybody with any kind of meaningful, Pharisaic tradition, any Jew, so to say, any like actual Semite people were kicked out of Rome, and it's a bunch of Gentiles over in Rome doing their best to figure it out. They don't have the same kind of influence that people in Antioch or Alexandria or otherwise do. They don't have it, right? And like, it's okay. Like they do their best with it, but there's challenges that were unique to the West that they faced, and like we look at and we appreciate these seeds of logos and beauty, and like where things are right, and where something isn't in its fullness, right? Whether that's like, like Syrian in the most classical sense, Orthodox folks, they're like, this greater Levant area, people pointing that out, or whether it's like the inheritance from the Rusins, or even like when there's a split with the Oriental Orthodox, we go, no, got to call back to the main root here, right? Because the how we talk about who Christ was, right? The distinctives around how we understand the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit matter. They really matter, and divergences from those can have various levels of consequences.
Tayo, you don't like? I didn't like the mature word either.
I'm sure.
You guys still can't handle drums. I mean, come on. There's no demons that are going to come out with the drums.
We have no intention on adding those in. And if it does, it'll take hundreds of years.
Yeah, I got triggered by the mature word, as my comments show. But more so, I guess my question is, Michael, I don't know how to, I'll call Michael, I'll call Satori, and call you Michael. Michael, you mentioned that from the Orthodox position, you guys see beauty in Protestantism, or the beauty is immature. Just say more about that immature beauty, what that looks like.
Well, and look, you could think about this in contrast to how the early church would have looked at, like, let's say that you got these, I'm going to say Trinitarians, but let's just even say whoever was genuinely faithful, right, and right oriented in the early church in this like first 300 years or something. Okay, the way that they would look at the Arians versus the way that they would have reflected back on the Neo-Assyrians is a very different thing, right? And so, like, what I mean by that is the Neo-Assyrians were like a murderous people who would stack skulls, right? That's a big problem, right? And many of their our people from our inheritance are killed, right? They wouldn't decimate people and eliminate a tenth. They'd wipe out a whole civilization. Okay, versus the Aryans, and they go, man, there is so much good here in what you attest to, the scripture you carry, the words that you use. There are seeds of logos aplenty, even though it may not be in its fullness. We may have to draw a boundary and go, you're falling outside of this boundary, right? But there's so much beauty that you have there. And we certainly don't mistake you with way far down the line Neo-Assyrians, or even just like non-violent pagans. Like there's a concentric circles of recognition of how close you are.
And Protestants aren't able to do that?
Yeah. So I would say they absolutely do that.
And what's the immaturity about the way which Protestants do that? Where's the immaturity?
So some of it, I mean, in a technical sense, some of it, like I would point to one, the obviousness of the time frame, right, and what you're working with, and what it misses, and the way that I see this is it plays out like a Greek tragedy, where there's so much, like babies are thrown out with so much bathwater, and understandably so, given the circumstances of what was going on in the West. It's like, man, I get it. Like, really, I get it. And I would have done the same thing. But not being able to bring along what was good and faithful from that Pharisaic tradition, the wheat from it, not being able to bring that along and integrate it, right? Whether that's the art, the liturgics, right? Not being able to bring that in and going, hey, what happened with the Western Church and the Pope became such a problem right? That we weren't even sure what to keep in and what to keep out. So we had to get like kind of crazy about it, right? And like makes sense. But this is why it's only been a few hundred years. It hasn't been that long, right? And you've started from such a low level. It doesn't really have a choice but to be in a state that is immature. This stuff takes, from our perspective, thousands of years.
Well, I guess we'll find out in a thousand years whether or not we reach maturity.
Yeah, and like honestly, from our perspective, it's like there is.
I'm not gonna lie, Michael.
Yeah,
and this isn't. I'm reacting
sure.
more so to Peugeot than to you, because I found myself since that Peugeot tweet about being Muslim instead of being Protestant because things are so much more beautiful, to be a little bit just done with the old author bros, because you guys are looking down on us too much. Yes, we were all enjoying criticizing Protestantism from the inside. But I feel like we've given too much criticism to the Orthodox that they're just yapping now and finding a sense of superiority in their conversion. That's just silly to me.
Teo, do you mind if I steel man that?
That would be generous of you. So no, I don't mind.
So the first thing that comes to mind, like the best thing that really came to mind as I've chewed on this was the Andrew Tate problem. Okay, so it's like one way of talking about this would be if the Western widely Protestant tradition en masse, right, and Big Eva or whatever. I grew up in this. I grew up in like box churches and barns and stuff, which has a beauty to it, But there's a problem. Okay. There's a lot of people who deconstruct from that, right? Or you just have like whatever generic secular people or, whatever. And there's going to be some subsection of people who, if they encountered box church versus this beautiful temple for not a great reason, right, they are going to have this draw to something like Islam, right, which is not good, objectively not good, right? So the concern about that, right, so with the Orthodox, the critique that we are putting out there, unashamed to do so, is if we are to tend the garden and I'm supposed to make my bed and my call is to be a presbyter on creation, right, then the most important place is also the place that I would attend to and make the most beautiful. It's important that I do that, right? And if we don't take that part seriously, right, then you're going to run into Andrew Tate problems. That's the consequence. You could choose not to do it, but you're going to run into Andrew Tate problems if you do.
I still don't know I'll like make that link stronger. How do we jump from not having paintings of Jesus in our churches to Andrew Tate?
So specifically with this conversation that was prompted with Peugeot's tweet, it's like the beauty and the architecture, right? Part of what's happening here is that even these folks can't escape the Son of Man, right? And so their recognition for what is beautiful, right, is still glimmers of logos, of participating in what is good and what is beautiful. It's not in its fullness. There's just seeds. And so they'll encounter that and be like, man, I was in this, right? But look at this. And from the Orthodox perspective, right, as a presbyter on creation, we should be aiming at the most beautiful thing that as long as, and truly, like what is the most beautiful thing is that which orients you and brings you towards Christ, right? In all its forms. That's not to say that I don't understand, that I can't understand the simplicity, like a monastic that goes out and he's just out in the woods and he doesn't have.
If that is not if that is what we're judging by, is bringing people unto Christ, is what's the most beautiful, then a worship service with the smoke machines and rock concerts, if people are having an encounter with the love of God,
Mhm.
that is still beautiful, and that's more beautiful than the most pretty mosque that there is. So the critique
So
doesn't really stand if that's what we're judging by. But it doesn't seem like that's what we're judging by. It seems like we're judging by pretty buildings. That's
yeah,
that's what that's what we're trying to aim for, not being closer to Christ, but having prettier buildings, which is dumb.
we disagree with that entirely, and we feel like that's a straw man against what we're saying. So I'll do my best to try to explain why, to the best of my ability here. Part of this is a time-tested thing. What has been safe over time. So, for instance, what the Christians, what the Messiahans inherit, right, is they're bringing everything from the Pharisaic tradition. They're bringing that in, right? Here's the temple. Here's the scripture. They're bringing a whole bunch of stuff with them, right? Some stuff is chaff. They got to cut it out, right? But they're bringing out most of that with them. So they bring this inheritance, and then they have to reorient it towards the memra that John is pointing out in John 1, right? The word of the Lord, Christ. So the liturgics have to better position themselves towards this fully filled revelation of a post-incarnate, risen Christ in Jesus, right? So they do that. So part of this has already been time-tested from these people over thousands of years beforehand. Now they're bringing it forward past that, right, and trying to make sure that it rightly orients towards Christ with the understanding, because this is what Scripture gives us, should you fail to do that, you will end up on the wrong track, you will miss the mark, and you again will not recognize the Son of Man if he was right in front of you, right? So then this inheritance, right, it is about beauty, but it's not about aesthetics. It's not about becoming Apollo worshipers. It's about figuring out where Apollo belongs on the hierarchy.
Yeah, I don't think so. That's what you the straw man is coming across from it, because I don't buy that argument that it's not about aesthetics. Because
Well, make sure you heard what I said there, though, right?
repeat it.
I'm not discarding aesthetics. I'm talking about it being rightly oriented on a hierarchy of attention.
You're talking about it, sorry? Talking about what?
Talking about rightly orienting aesthetics on a hierarchy of attention. Right?
Yeah.
Apollo must kneel. And he does have a place on a hierarchy, but he cannot have the top place.
So what's the thing that's been made top in Protestant box churches that shouldn't be there?
Libertas.
What? Liberty.
Yeah.
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
I would say that's a straw man. I don't go to my box church, Protestant church on Sundays because I'm going to worship liberty.
Yeah.
So that's a straw man.
Well, so here's how we would look at that is too often, and like this happens in my own life, right? Where there's things where I miss the mark personally. So let's say how much of my time do I have my eyes set on Christ and have him at the top, right? God willing, most of the time, probably not. I'm the chief of sinners, right? But to whatever degree I do,
I'm the chief of sinners. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. So then there are some things that me in particular, and then even just like as an American, maybe even as a Texan, an American, right, or something, that there are certain things that bubble up too far, right? And they go too far up the hierarchy, right? And so maybe, like, for instance, you run into somebody's house and aesthetics, Apollo has been put too far down the hierarchy. It should never be at the top, but it's been too far down the hierarchy. And so maybe, like, you're attempting to have Christ at the top, but in your rebellion, some pieces are out of order, right? And the rebellion may not even be particularly obvious, right? And so this happens to me personally all the time, and so it does at a fractal level.
Who's rebelling?
We are Satori, as rebellious Protestants. We don't know how to integrate old things into new properly.
Well,
okay. Well, this is like, okay, that's fine. I'm just telling you, don't just say Protestant, because I have a Reformational worldview that integrates everything.
Yeah.
So, and it seems like sometimes the Orthodox Church is the hand that's telling everybody that they're not part of the body because they're not a hand. So, and not you, but and probably more in the online space.
I would say yes, you, but I'm not speaking for my Satori.
It's okay. I'm friendlier than many, but still maintain.
Do you go to many services other than on Sunday mornings, Michael?
When I can, yeah, and sometimes more obediently than others. Yeah.
Well, you should invite me to one of these weekday things, and then maybe I'll just be hit by the woo. I don't know. I don't feel comfortable, honestly, just wandering in on my own. But if you send me the invitation, I will do my best to try to make it happen.
Anytime. Look. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, which one do you go to? I know there's a few.
So I go to St. Ephrem. Here's a funny thing, guys. Out of all this, we are in temporary. Like, our church building is being built, right? So my last 2.5 years, right, have been in, like, these temporary locations. When I got here to San Antonio, we're in a shopping mall, in a space above a hookah nightclub. Right. And so I'd like show up on Saturday on Vespers or something, and there's like booming club music in the bottom while we're trying to have liturgy. Right. Or later on, my godfather, who's like helping, handle a lot of the building project, he's got this other property, and there's a gymnasium. It's like an old Methodist property where, like, we've bought like half of it, and there's a gymnasium. It's like an ugly abandoned gymnasium. Nobody's done anything with it for 20 years. And we have to try to, like, use that as a space to worship, right? So we gather together. It's an ugly gym. There's stuff hanging out all over the place, but we did our best with it. We got kicked out of that space, right? Then the Saturday people, right, Seventh-day Adventists, allowed us to rent.
How are you guys getting kicked out when you don't have drums and electric guitars? That's it.
Yeah. Well, the space that we were at, they said it wasn't coded to be able to handle that.
Okay. So it's just the bureaucracy.
It was bureaucracy there. So then the Saturday people let us rent their space on Sundays. We're gathering together at a Seventh-day Adventist church, right, making that work. And then we were like, that ran its stint. Our church building's still not ready. And right now, the Methodists down the street from where our church is going to be, they said, you can use our gymnasium on Sundays, right? And so it's like this not aesthetically beautiful gymnasium, right, where we have to bring the absolute minimal in. So we got our altar, we got our candles, we got 2 icons, right, and we're making it work. So most of my time in the Orthodox Church has not been in this prestigious, 200-year building with developed iconography, but in this thing that we're reaching for.
Yeah, that is interesting because so I've been kind of writing this thing, and this is just me trying to sort out all my thoughts on these things and take the critique seriously and examine things, and it is interesting that it's the Orthodox and the evangelicals are the most willing to make do with spaces that are not ideal. The Catholics don't. They will build a church or whatever, and obviously they have this. That's the
They don't
power
need
of centrality. Well, when they do,
No, they don't
when
need
they do,
to.
they need to. When they need to, they do. But
when do they need to?
well, like they did a lot. Like I'm saying, like in the 70s and all this stuff. It's just whenever they decided that they need a new church, they build a church.
That's because a global jurisdiction
Yeah.
where they're like, I mean, if the Eastern Orthodoxy in North America was canonically regular, which it isn't, then I don't think the Eastern Orthodox would put up with all of these little.
Well, they're growing. But I mean, they're actually growing. They are growing. So that's the thing. If you're growing, you need space, and you rent it until you can build it. So that's that's just like.
Well, for us, it's absolutely nothing can stop the Eucharist. For us, like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how small it is. It doesn't matter. Like, man, I was telling Jacob about this the other day. The church that I'm in, right, is Antiochian, right? Now, this was founded off of like some Palestinians and Lebanese and Syrian people, right? Their inheritance is hundreds of years ago. They're sacked by the Muslims. They're not allowed to have their art. They're not allowed to have their scripture. And they have to gather together and sing, and it can hopefully share a little bit of wine and bread together. And it's like that for a long time, right? Where just singing the liturgics is how they're having to carry through in the oral tradition what scripture is most important to carry through, right? What song, what notes, what sounds are most important to carry through, because they're dropped down to their bare essentials if they're just not outright killed for it, right? So,
well, so that was an interesting thing, that the architecture aspect is actually not very, from what I gathered, there are many Orthodox churches that are in repurposed space. The architecture is not really important as far as the like shape of the building. It's more so having the stuff on the inside set up the right way.
It's all of it. Yeah. Like
well, Chad, answer Chad's question. Like, would you be able to do an Orthodox home church? Like, can your priest decide to do liturgy at his house, in his living room?
So what happens more practically is, let's say you don't have a space to gather in, right? The ecclesia, the community, right, might have like, okay, well, somebody has a home and somebody has a space that we are going to turn into the space where we have Eucharist, right? And so we gather together and do that, right? So in that way, yes, right? But it's always about finding like, where's the place that everyone's going to gather together for communion, for community, to build, to gather. And then just to jump back to Sartar's point, look, like coming from like reversing course here on like a serious communist mindset of like nothing matters. Entering the Orthodox Church is like everything matters. The architecture, the paintings, the scripture, every single thing, all of it matters. There's nothing that doesn't matter. Everything matters. And then what's the highest that you could bring that thing to point at Christ?
If I tap my hand on my leg, will I get kicked out for trying to drum? Like, does that count as an instrument?
You absolutely won't get kicked out. I mean, unless it's like you're being like crazy about it. But like, so the way something like that goes is, it's like, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, sort of a thing. Like, here you are in someone's home with a family, right, and as a guest. So they have a way, they have a liturgy, they have a work of the people to do, and so can be respectful towards that, right? Should you feel inclined, participate in that. All are welcome, right? We'll bring you in should you want to be brought in. But if you come in with like doing just whatever kind of crazy thing that you want to do, there's a whole bunch of tolerance and patience, right? But like if it gets to like some crazy point, like I was in Dallas and at a service, and some guy, that was like really struggling, right? Like most of us would talk about him as being like maybe some kind of like heavy drug user, like a lot of schizophrenia kind of things going on. And he's saying some crazy things during service. And we're like, chill. No one's doing anything. Just let him be. And then eventually a deacon comes and like they're talking to him and whatever. And then he gets like kind of crying. He's like wanting to fight a little bit. Right. And we're like, hey, it's all right, man. Like, let's just go outside. Right. So there's levels.
Yeah, that happens in every church.
Exactly. Yeah, and look, especially right now, I think post World War II and post what happened to, the largest Orthodox nation in the world at the time, like what happened to Russia, there's a lot of sensitivity on bringing in anything new. Because leading up to World War II, it's like, all right, let's modernize some of the iconography. Let's make it a little bit more realistic. Oh, let's bring in an organ. Let's bring in this thing. Let's bring in that thing. Right. And it's not like those things are directly responsible for what happens to Russia, but they're not unrelated, right? And so there's like a spirit among the people about what's going on there that helps us reflect, and that as a reflection, those changes being brought in too quickly and not understanding the kind of effect that they have should be taken really seriously. And they have to be observed through a multi-generational effort. Jacob, I like the tagline.
I thought it was cute. I'm guessing a lot of people will miss the H, which will be hilarious.
Right. So Skankenstein is the name. God sent in the commies to judge y'all for adopting an organ. So like no, but like there's a way to see it.
No, but yes is what you said. It's like it's not inconsequential. It's not unrelated. Was what you said.
Yeah, like here's my best understanding.
Basically, the spirit of change. That similar spirits, the spirits of change that allow them or compel them to add something new, such as an organ, to the liturgy, is also the spirit of change that compel them to communism.
In a way, yeah, because what's happening in Russia, especially among the a few different czars and families.
Yeah, sure.
Well, they're like, we got to update things. We got to Western. We got to do this. We got to do that. And their desire to reach out and like pull stuff in, right, and change things because the state has to keep up. The spirit around that, right, is how you see how
You got a link. You got a link in bio.
good.
Who was that kid?
I don't know.
It could have been worse, Satori. It could have been worse.
I know. I'm just like, I'm not going to wait for something bad to happen. I mean, I don't know. You should be 18 if you're going to be in this stream.
So Teo, I think under my hope is that a mature perspective on the Protestants, as we get from an Orthodox perspective, is the West got really rebellious from the other four main branches, right? So Rome gets really rebellious, and you guys reacted to that. We're also upset about.
Bro, I was born in '95. I'm just following my parents' tradition.
Yeah. So exactly, right? So, but it's also something that you're inheriting here, right? So Rome gets really rebellious, right? And then your ancestors, right, are like from our tradition, from Protestant tradition. I'm part of this too, right? They go no to a lot of that, and we're not even sure what the right path is. We're not even sure what to keep and what to throw out. Well, what you're doing isn't it, right? And that was right. That was right. That was it. But
No, but from my perspective, my story isn't that. My story is it took I'm the product of a whole bunch of Protestant missionaries going into Nigeria and compelling the preaching the gospel to pagans, for lack of a better word,
yeah,
who are worshiping Ifa, Ogun, and all sorts of other gods, and by the same spirits that raised Christ from the dead entered them, and they became Christians and changed their life. And generations after that, I came along and I was born into true Christianity, and praise God for that. It's the story, your painting of what Protestantism is. If there wasn't the spirit of change that you're so afraid of, that compelled them to want to go and explore into, you know, different continents, my generation would still be worshiping Ifa.
so change is something that has to be rightly ordered. Not afraid of change. It just has to be put on the right position on that hierarchy, right? And there's also a proportionality to how much to offer at a given time, right? And this is what we're counting on Christ to point us at, right? It's like, when do I bring this in? What's the right amount of change? And what's the right amount of conservation? Like, how do we determine that? Should we be obedient to Christ? It's a guiding to hit that mark of the right amount of it at the right time. So then, for those Protestants that came out there and the inheritance that they had, right, of monks raping people, paying for confessions, so on and so forth, that was happening within the Church of Rome, right? Like, yeah, right. Like we would even say that's a good spirit guiding them to reject those things, and you can see the Son of Man at work there, right? The hope is that now the West that has broken away from that and been trying to figure it out is now having a serious conversation with the East that was frankly hard to get in touch with at the time because we were in the middle of being sacked by Islam, right? So having that dialogue and that conversation, like, we're a part of this right now, guys. This is what this is.
Yeah, but it seems like all you've got to contribute to the conversation is Protestants are immature. But that's
So,
maturity now.
look, I think that it's like triggering words, but part of it is you go, I'm throwing out so much because I'm rejecting what was going on with the Church of Rome, and we're almost having to start from scratch, not completely from scratch, but we don't know what to keep and what to throw out, right? It's only been 500 years. It's only been 500 years. That's not very long. So when I talk about it immature, I'm meaning like almost in a technical sense, not in a dismissive or like I'm trying to make a diss kind of way.
I just wouldn't be so sensitive about the word immature. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the entirety of Christianity is like 500 years behind where it necessarily needs to be.
So, like when you hear Father Stephen talk to Jacob, right, the tension is like, all of your claims are just as much our inheritance, right? And they're not going to agree about those things, which is why they're on different sides.
Yeah, I feel like this is like the Orthodox Church in America, at least, and evangelicalism is the MLB. I mean, I don't know. That's how the argument comes across, as if these guys are telling their Yankees and the Red Sox that they're not real baseball. I mean,
yeah, because if we're talking immature, the Orthodox Church in America is very immature.
Yeah. Hey.
But I mean, it's cool that you like. But here's the thing: like, I love this. Like, I love what it's preserving. I just like, well, and this is the other thing I thought about. So I was looking it up. You know, there's, obviously there should be I think a problem across the board with our culture and Christianity is that it's so much been reduced to like a Sunday morning thing, or whatever sliver of somebody's life. Maybe Sunday morning, maybe they're very devout in their private time, but it doesn't affect the greater spheres of people's life, in their workplace, in their, family or their extended community. And so then I look at the Orthodox, and like, they certainly have, that's supposed, should be some of the ideal. I think but that was so connected to like the ethnic element, like also with like what Denise was talking about in the stream today with like the Catholic communities, that it's really hard to fit that, in. Okay, because here's my thought. So like I looked it up, like the numbers or whatever, and it's like there's only a handful of like Orthodox schools, like grade schools, but there's a ton of Catholic ones and a ton of conservative Protestant evangelical ones. Yeah. And so then it's like, okay, if you are in the Orthodox Church and you're wanting to have the fullness of like, a life experience, and, your choices are, do I send my kid to the public school or to like an evangelical school? I mean, I'm sure that people, make that choice.
I seriously think that might not actually be catching the fact that the Oriental Orthodox have been in the United States for much longer, and they do have a bunch of schools. And frankly, I'm guessing a lot of Eastern Orthodox put their kids in Oriental Orthodox schools. But Armenian and Coptic schools, they're, at least in Los Angeles, they've been around for a while.
Well, yeah, I don't know, but yeah, I mean,
for a lot of us, it's ideal. Like if we can, the closer in proximity to our people and our lineage and the worldview that we take on, the closer a school is to that, then the more aligned it is, right? Obviously. So you go, okay, well, hey, here's the Oriental Orthodox, and like every branch of it is sort of like in a slightly different place. The Coptics don't necessarily agree with the Ethiopians, blah, blah, blah. But all of them are closer than sending my kid to a Hindu school or a secular school, right? And so if you can afford it, you do it.
Okay, so then this brings up another thought. Like, is some of this problem that like Orthodox is only like equipped for disputes within Christendom and not like engaging the culture at large? Because by extension of the previous,
which cult?
Well, what I'm saying is that so if my church has a school and you would rather send your kid to my church's school instead of public school, agreeing that to whatever extent the Bible is being taught and Christian values are being upheld, it's a better alternative. Then like that should be a point of unity where we are both culturally aligned in opposition to the stuff the public school is teaching, at least.
Yeah, because like what the like, so, and this happens, like there's a lot of Orthodox families who will send their kids to some Protestant, whatever brand, of, and it'll be closer, right? It'll be closer. But then again, sometimes there will be a Christian school that's like it has gone so far off in some weird particular area. Like maybe they're so hard on dispensationalism that it's like, I actually would rather have them in a secular school, but it depends on the secular school. Like if it's a secular school that's like coming out with a ton of trans kids and cat girls, it's like, well, maybe not, Maybe that's not the better place, and I'd rather them deal with the dispensationalists, or maybe I just homeschool them, right? So it's a weighing out of options.
Yeah. So okay. So is it just because it's the nature of online discourse then that we?
Did you see that report that was in the New York Post that Jordan Peterson tweeted out today?
No.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, there was a recent report where I mean, there's just a bunch of trolls being paid and bots, Russian, and I mean, I didn't actually look at the report. I don't know what their evidence is, but I mean, it was such confirming of my biases that it was like, well, obviously.
So chat, I think a lot of things that I represent and say really rub chat the wrong way. And that's okay, right? Like it's okay that it does that. But I do want to try to be faithful to our perspective and like what's in, what's out, and not like we're not ecumenicists. We're never going to be that, even though we are still friendly. Like we have this communion bread, right? And in the middle of it is a piece that we cut out. Those are in communion. Those who are in communion share in that inner bread, and then we have this outer bread that gets offered to all, right? And so there's a both and of like, you're not in this inside group, but here's bread that we still offer you, right? Here, so we are still sharing part of a body.
Hello, Denise.
Hello. Is my sound quality okay?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Good.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just popped in. I was speed watching the first part of it, and I guess you guys we're talking a little bit about this morning and Jonathan Peugeot's remarks about, and you're going around a few different angles of the question of aesthetics and beauty and art. And I had said something this morning about resonating with Jonathan Peugeot because, or Peugeot really, because we come from the same background. I also have a name ending in EAU. And something I wanted to say, you were just talking about secular public school education. And growing up, we all assume other people are learning what we learn, especially when we're kids. And it was really a long time before I understood that public school kids did not have the kind of immersion in art that parochial school kids had. And I don't want to go into all the politics around that, but it results in most Americans who come out of the public school system have a rather fragmented view that you've got art here and this there and that there. And I think that when Jonathan Peugeot said what he said about the mosque, I don't think he was referring to the theology and ideology of Islam, which clearly is the problem, but he was referring to the entire immersion in a cultural activity that if you walk into a megachurch American prosperity type of service compared to being able to pray in a mosque, I can understand what he was saying, and it doesn't have anything to do with rejecting Jesus for Muhammad. It's I don't want to offend anybody because clearly we're of different generations, and I would say I'm 2 generations even further back because I did grow up in a rather anachronistic enclave. But the immersion, I can't go to a prosperity megachurch thing because the entire setting is just not good for me. I mean, it is not something that I can go into, and the same reason why I don't go to Novus Ordo Church anymore, Novus Ordo Mass, because there's sacrilege going on. And people don't always know that that's what's going on. And I don't want to offend people or get into arguments, but the smoke and the rock concert atmosphere, no. So I don't think Jonathan Peugeot was trying to make a statement about Orthodox or Christian belief, faith, and theology and Islam. I think that the aesthetic setting of a mosque, I've never been inside a real mosque, but I've seen videos, right? They are beautiful. They're amazing. But that beauty is a very ancient cultural thing, which actually has very little to do with all the crazy propaganda that causes people to run around starting wars with each other. And it has, and most, I'm sorry, but it's a simple fact that the average Muslim person is not part of warfare any more than the average Christian is part of warfare. But, I just wanted to point that out. Anyway, I don't want to, take over or anything, but I wanted to defend Jonathan's statement before, because I keep seeing it being spun into this ideological thing, and I don't think that's what he meant. I really believe that he was talking about the act of being in a communal worship position in that setting. And if you could imagine having a Christian service in a mosque building, the building of a mosque, it would not be a bad thing. It could work. But anyway, that's
yeah. So one, it's like, from the Orthodox perspective, everything in Islam is a Christian heresy, right? And they're taking from that inheritance, and so it's like,
but you've been in a mosque. There's abstract tile. It's swirls of flowers. I
mean this in a good way, as in like they have branched off of and taken from us, and so there's like a recognition thing going on where we go, the beauty that they have is diminished, but still carries through what they got from us, right?
Well, I see what you're saying, but I think that you're limiting yourself to a hyper-logical, ideological approach, because I really think that that's not really what is being embodied in a sacred space. And the rock concert milieu, unfortunately, I'm going to be, okay, I'll say it's fucking satanic. Yeah, I even said the F word, because that's who it serves. That is who it serves.
If I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's very nice to meet you. Welcome.
Yeah, I know. I crossed the line.
No. You didn't cross the line at all. I just wanted to keep this personal because this is a conversation. Tayo's been to my house. Michael's been to my house. Sartori should come and visit my house. And you're welcome as well. And no, you didn't cross a line at all. In fact, I think you are adding a very important perspective that unfortunately I don't think we spend enough time on. And Michael knows I love him enough. Michael, not Sartori. Michael, the ortho bro, knows I love him well enough to be a little blunt here. I think you're not properly appreciating how Denise comes from. To go back to what Chad was saying, I think a lot of the people who become Orthodox Christians from Protestant bring in a Protestant view. I don't know what's. I'm getting some feedback. Yeah, I think it was yours, Denise. Yeah, sorry. I think there is a Protestant bedrock, right, of worldview that so many people bring in. And I think, in fact, what Denise is pointing out, especially in regard to the mosque, right? You walk into a mosque, and frankly, I have to say, if Denise is thinking about the exact same tweet I'm thinking about, which was Pajot's from a few days ago, where he tweeted out the blue mosque, which apparently is a replica of the Hagia Sophia, right? So he was fractally trolling people, right?
Absolutely.
You know, Catholic architecture is better than the Byzantine architecture anyway, but that's just
look, look, we have to. I think we have to recognize. I mean, as somebody who was born in Iran, has intense hatred for the Islamic regime there, and is obsessively waiting for the news that Khamenei is dead. As much as I don't like to celebrate anybody's death, I'm not going to really mind if they kill him, and his son, and everybody related to him. Like, the yeah, we have to appreciate the genius of Islam, right? And if you truly believe that the God who runs the world, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Israel, the God who controls history, and for a Christian, the God of Jesus, right? Then you have to go, look, there are millions of people in sub-Saharan Africa who today are being and I was wondering if Tayo saw during the synod, there were actually a couple of people from sub-Saharan Africa, but one guy who came and said he's helping with the churches, and prosperity gospel was his primary worry. He's like, this is not the gospel, right? But the fact is, it is the charismatics and the Pentecostals who are really booming in Africa. And if, like me, you believe that these people being taken out of like actual paganism, like not the paganism Christians generally are in, but real paganism, right? I'm making jokes. Denise, I don't know if you know me. I make a lot of barbs and jokes, so it's fine. Okay, but we have to have appreciation. I have appreciation for Hinduism, right? Don't agree with it at all, but God decided that 1 billion people, right, are best exposed to him by being born in that environment. Who am I to second guess that? And I can't completely discount the genius that must exist even within Hinduism.
So the thing I really wanted to tack on to what Denise was saying, because I agreed with all of it. I'm not sure if I underappreciate it, but it's the example of what's happening to Zoomer men, these Gen Z men, okay, young men who are going, I'm looking for vitality. I'm looking for something to move forward. What I had in the past didn't contain me. And it's why I call it the Andrew Tate problem, is they look and they go, look at the beauty and the architecture and the masculinity, and here's all this stuff, right? Because there's a lack of it in where they're coming from. And they go, I would rather go there, right? And that's a problem. That's a problem. Now, that's also not to say, like, do I have to compare? Like, would I rather see people in Islam than pagan, like being pagans? Well, it depends on which period and what time and what kind of thing that they're practicing, right? Because the way that Islam was coming down on the Christians and sacking their cities and killing like that particular group of type of Islam people, no,
They're still murdering Christians in Nigeria. Just have to throw that out there.
Right.
I was about to say that we talk a lot about genocide, except for the one that actually is going on, which is the genocide of Christians in Muslim countries, including Nigeria. But
I think for most of us Orthodox, like, Islam looks a lot more like a cult of Mars than anything, right? It just does. And Peugeot is not empty of that, but he's pointing.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to point out is that you are only paying attention to, and what you're right about what you're saying. I'm not arguing with it, but the entire world, in terms of the what we live in, the dimensions in which we each live, no matter where we are, is not limited to verbal, intellectual words. The atmosphere, the physical atmosphere, and the Hagia Sophia, and the question of the relationship between the Blue Mosque and the Hagia Sophia is steeped in history that goes back a lot further than any of this, and is complicated and is not really relevant. I mean, what I was trying to say about the education background is, if you have not been immersed in an art community of sorts in your early childhood, because the public school system does actually suppress that part of our psyche. I'm sorry, there's something weird going on my screen. Is everything okay here?
Yeah, that was me.
Good.
Yeah, that was me. There's an article I always bring up, which is it's a few years old now, but it's an article about a whole village of Nigerian Christians were about to be murdered. They fled.
Oh yeah, no, I don't doubt any of that.
I'm reinforcing your point, right?
Yeah, but the thing is, when now, it seems that what we're going through now is a different level of warfare and genocide that I don't think people really fully understand how unnecessary that some of these arguments are. Mm-hmm. Because, as I was saying, growing up, I assumed that the kids who went to public school had the same complete participation by their families in art as we did within our Catholic enclave. But they didn't, because in the public school system, and I found this out when my sister sent her children to public school, and we ran into it right away, there was explicit suppression of our culture. And I mean, very explicit. She was shocked. And my father had said, well, why do you think I kept you kids out? And the explicit suppression is also of any form of art. So the only way people can get involved in art, if they grew up, and I'm speaking about public school in the 80s and 90s and so on, and I think it's still the same, except there's other weird stuff happening. The only way you could get involved in art was as an adult, more or less, or teenager, who takes a special interest, and then somehow, if you're lucky, your parents are able to get you enrolled in something special, but it's never included in the regular school program. And your own family is not, in most cases, is not generally involved in the arts for most kids. And this is something that, as I was saying, if you grow up in this, you can see that the beauty of architecture, that especially ancient architecture, obviously, if you walked into one of the, well, you were mentioning the Hindu thing, there are some really weird temples I've seen, and yeah, no, you wouldn't really want to do Christian worship around them because, yeah, they're very interesting, but they're not meant for the same kind of
Well, Denise,
enhancement of the mind.
this is what we did, though. This is what we did with the Parthenon, right? Is that we turned it into a Christian place of worship, right? And we burned the chaff, right, and kept the wheat and redeemed it because there were seeds of logos there.
Well, anyway, I don't really have anything else to say. But it's just.
Mario sounds like he has something he wants to add here.
Yeah. Firstly, I just want to say I do appreciate, Dennis, you coming on to re-emphasize the fact that Peugeot wasn't actually genuinely trying to say that he prefers Islam to Christianity, and it was more talking about the atmosphere, like you said, the way in which it's conducive to worship. And I think in my reaction to it, certainly on this stream, it might have seemed as if that point was lost on me. And so I'm glad you brought it up and emphasized it. And I do agree with that. That wasn't the point he was trying to make. However, he is still trolling, like Jacob said, and the troll is directed at something. It's not nothing. And the point about box church evangelical spaces, and you even went further by calling the rock music Satan worship. I think it's fair that Protestants like myself do react to that and say, wait, no, that's not what we're doing, and to want to say actually there is worship happening here. And it seems the other thing I wanted to say is it seems that this comes down to preference, because the musicians thrive in Protestant churches, maybe less so the painters do. And it might be that, yes, and Protestants, for the most part, we praise God that people like Peugeot and yourself, Denise, found a space that's conducive and where you can actually encounter God properly. Yes, uh, exactly, Michael. Sartori, that is. And it seems on the other side, certainly recently and online the last 5 years, the people that are finding this beauty in the liturgy and in uh, the space that they're worshiping in are now looking back and saying, no, that's satanic. Not that wasn't for me, that wasn't conducive for me. It's no, that's outside of the box and should be cut out.
The question. So, I mean, I still have. This is like the last in several incidents with Peugeot where he's shown trollishness and thin skin on criticism. I mean, I have an unlisted video that he asked me to take down because he thought I was harming his brand or whatever, even though it was just giving legitimate critiques. But my question is, where is the like rank of importance between finding the correct expression of worship and honoring your father and mother? Because, like, that's because that's my story. Is that I am honoring the tradition that I was born into by remaining an evangelical. I mean, my father converted, was born again, but he came, him and his parents came to peace about it. They, he was being attacked by demons, and he realized it when he went to he watched The Exorcist, and then he went to the Catholic priest, hoping that the Catholic priest would say, no, that stuff's made up. And the priest said it was real, but he couldn't do anything for him. But then some other Christians in a little real estate office, told him about the gospel and started sharing some scripture with him. And then this lady prays with him, prays scripture, and the demons go away. And, the conversation that he had with his parents was, something has changed in you. Obviously, it's a good thing. We can tell, like, you are much more at peace? Can you still remain Catholic? And what he said was that he could, but it would be very easy for him to fall back into bad habits. And they said, well, that's okay. You don't, then you should do what's best for you. So and that sets me up to say, like, oh, there doesn't have to be disunity between traditions, because that was my grandparents, and they were Christians and we were Christians. We went to different churches, but there was no, we were of one body in that sense. But with Peugeot, where is the deal with his father? Like this Wheaton professor that brought his family from Catholicism into the Baptist faith. What is the resolution of that? I've never heard it. Jonathan doesn't mention it. It's like this fact that we know from somewhere out in the environment, but like, what?
Look, I'm not gonna speak exactly what I know went on there, but the high level that I think that we would talk about it is like, okay, you gotta fit. Okay, so my family, this like happened to me too. Like here, I'm brought up in this Christian home. My mom's got me in scripture all day, right? I'm going to this Pentecostal church, right? Now I end up just deconstructing from it. But then like her parents and where they came from, right? Here's like these Methodists. I found out on my mom's side, here's these Anglicans that we were descended from, right? And so it was like, here's an Anglican tradition, and then there's like these separations, and then like my mom sort of had like a really terrible secular thing, and then gets brought back to the faith. But she's grew up with demons and like this super violent home, and so now like she's part of this Jesus movement thing, has landed in a Pentecostal thing. It feels very spiritually alive. I deconstruct from that, right, because of theological problems and the fruits that are there as a result of that, and then find my way into the Orthodox Church, right? And there's this like, okay, like wandered off the path, and then like I got chased down, right, and then brought to be grafted back into the main branch, and now I spend time with my parents, and we're finding these areas like of common ground. Right? What is pistis? How do we understand faith? Right? And we have to talk this stuff out, because there's a grafting of the family back in. Right? It takes time.
I think. Sorry, go on, Jacob.
No, go ahead, Taya.
I would just want to highlight the deconstruction part of the story, because that's not nothing. To my Protestant ears, the deconstruction means the gospel stopped being beautiful to you. And I think if the critique on that was being veered back was at the what's the word I'm looking for, prosperity gospel that's rampant in a lot of Protestant churches, I'll be right there with you. Yes, that's a false gospel, and you might as well be Muslim if that's the gospel that you believe in, because that's not the true gospel. So yes, I would be right there with you. But if the true gospel is still being preached, even it's in a box, that should still be seen as beautiful. And the fact that it isn't is worrisome to me as a Christian.
Yeah, and look, when I was in the shaking of that deconstruction, because I fell into like an anti-theology, right? I fell into this materialist nihilism thing, and so when that was really like I was in the blackness of that in the worst way, the little glimmers of light of the tradition that I came from, right, where there was plenty of prosperity gospel stuff going on, the glimmers that held up that were genuinely still logos were like a breadcrumb trail back. Like they are beautiful, they are good. I visit my parents and I go to church with them sometimes, and I'm thankful that exists that way. I can't participate the way that they participate. I can't have communion with them the same way, because we're not of the same body. But I love and I'm so thankful for what they do have.
So Michael knows me too well. I had to bring up this Bible verse because this is the one that has been very meaningful to me personally in my journey. As far as, I mean, the ones who know about my life know that my conflict with my parents over religion has played a huge role in it. And as I like to do, I always like to go back to scripture. So the Leviticus 19:3. It's very funny how the NIV decided to translate it or retranslate it, because you'll see the King James version says, "You shall fear every man his mother and his father, and keep my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God." And then the new King James version says, "Every one of you shall revere his mother and his father, and keep my Sabbaths." And then the NIV, "Each one of you must respect." Well, the word there is not the same word as in the Ten Commandments that says you should respect your mother and father. It's actually to fear, to be in awe of, right? And in the Hebrew, there's a clear distinction between the laws of which command us to love God and the ones that command us to fear God, right? And there's this, the word here is yira, is to fear, is to be in awe of, right? And the distinction there is in the Hebrew is even more striking, because it's like, what's the connection? Each one of you must respect your father, your mother and father, and the rabbis do talk about why it says mother before it says father, and you must observe my Sabbaths. Like, what is the connection there? And it's, I don't know if I have a good exegesis, but that conflict is real. And like, we talk about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? We don't really mention Terach very often, because who was Abraham's father, who was an idolater, right? And I mean, you see this contradiction in the Christian scriptures, right? In some respects, Jesus says, you know, the importance of family, etc. But in a lot of respects, who is my mother and who is my father, and who are my brothers, right?
There's a tension.
Yeah, and he who does not hate his mother and father, right, etc., etc., etc. There's a real tension here, and frankly, I think any attempt to resolve the tension without first completely living in the tension is just failing to actually deal with the situation.
What do you mean by the last part, Jacob? Without living in?
So there, let's talk about Hegel, because we love Hegel around here. There's this idea of thesis, antithesis, synthesis, right? And there is, unfortunately, a simplification of that dialectic into, okay, now that we have the synthesis, let's get rid of the thesis and antithesis. And a true Hegelian understands that no, the process, you have to carry the process forward. The thesis and the antithesis must be existent and not nullified by the synthesis.
Okay.
Right?
So is that what you hear when you hear Orthodox Christians do a lot of both anding?
No, actually, when people truly both and, that's when they're actually understanding the synthesis. I think a lot of people, when they both and, they don't recognize that they're merely engaging in negation.
I guess I'm pointing out when it's like coming through in a faithful way. When you hear Father Stephen do it, let's say.
I have very few criticisms of Father Stephen, other than he just hasn't realized who the real priest in the conversation is. The the like eventually he's going to have to realize that there's a reason why the Eastern Orthodox Church has been wrong for 2,000 years, and he's trying to reawaken it to the truth. I almost made a video. Gavin Ortland just put out a video today on yesterday on the Cruz Tucker Carlson thing, and his whole thing is like this dispensationalist view of Israel is completely new. Nobody believed this before. I'm like, yes, thank you for making my point, Gavin. Christianity's been wrong for 2,000 years, and now everybody sees it. But okay, back to actual thing. No, I mean, this wasn't a criticism of Eastern Orthodoxy, although it may be a little bit of a criticism of the Ortho Bros, which I think I share with Father Stephen, which is they think that if the Protestant Reformation, like people hear me constantly attack the Protestants, and frankly, I don't think I'm attacking the Protestants. I think I'm attacking problems within Protestantism, but they hear me as if I am saying that the Reformation did not move the world forward. And it's like, if you don't recognize, if you have no appreciation for what the Protestant Reformation did in God's world over the past 500 years, you are a heretic.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that gets at like Sam's project recently of like, what's the wheat that we keep here? You can't throw out all those babies with the bathwater.
I think that has to be everyone's project always.
Yeah. I agree.
So, the point that I was bringing up with the honor that, your mother and father thing. And Michael, obviously, you have come to some peace with your parents, we talked about that, some understanding. I mean, I don't know it's like, this is just even the thing of, whatever, being somewhat autistic and just trying to figure out people that from different cultures have different languages and grammars. And so I'm just always trying to, like, what do you mean when you say like a body or not a body, or that your parents are like not of the same body, but it's, you're not saying you're worried they're going to hell or I don't think, right? Is that your concern? Or
so one, not for me to know, that's for the Father to know. Two, the only thing that I can say on that I'm confident to say on it is, when this flesh passes, whatever parts of my heart that are dead wood will necessarily burn away. And that's all I know.
Okay. Well, I mean, fair enough. Because it starts with it, like, because it was the same time when Jonathan did his tweet, Father Andrew Stephen Damick. It was from the ARC conversation, but he was talking to Justin Brierly, and I was watching that, and he was talking about, I worked at this concerts and things, and then I realized like it's all just techne with the music and stuff, and so that we can criticize the like musical aspect, the techne aspect of the modern music, but instrumentation or whatever, like that is a very ancient techne at this point. But we've had many more techne that have come and gone, and to criticize the use of that, because this is what I say, like Orthodox want to say, like, if you want to say that that's a problem with these churches, they've had no problem. Like other churches have struggled with the introduction of techne, like the radio and television and podcasts, even, and some churches decided we're not going to engage. many of those, if they were, we don't hear about them anymore, or their influence diminished. Others who embraced those had their influence greatly expanded. But the Orthodox have just come right up to 21st century with all manner of techne that have been innovated by Protestants in the internet space. And even like, as I said, like the whole way thing with the Lord of Spirits, it's like, hey, we're just here to tell broader internet world, by which we mean evangelical Protestants, all about Orthodoxy, just so you can learn about it, just so you can check it out. And then when you come in, we're going to tell you that, this is the only real one, and everything that you had is a lie. And
hold on there.
Well, no, I'm not saying that. No, this is not representative of the people of Father Andrew and Father Stephen, but this is like, because I was in that Facebook group for a long time, and I see these people who are like, I need to get my parents out of their evangelical church because I'm worried for their souls, and that's where I'm like, this is weird. Like if you like.
Well, let me. Can I throw one thing in there that will help?
Okay.
Right? You don't have to dig very far, just even on YouTube or something, to see that, widely speaking, the clergy within Orthodox will say, we have great hope for America, and it's the whore of Babylon. Right? This is the empire. Here's this huge market, right? Like what we see today, right, in the West, this American thing, this post-World War II thing, right? We see Babylon. We see Babylon, right? Now, how to deal with Babylon, right? How to deal with the empire, whether it's the Assyrians and Nineveh, right? That Jonah's like, I don't even want to see them saved. I don't want to see them helped, right? Like, screw that. Screw those guys. They're stacking up skulls all over the place. No. Like, go love them too. Go help them too, right? And so we hope for a transition to Jerusalem rather than Babylon, right? But that depends on faithfulness. It depends on that pistis, right? And so, like, the things that brought this particular empire to existence, right, has to do with a certain faith that goes along with it, right? And there's goodness in it, right? But there's a lot of challenges. We're not shy about that.
Yeah, I'm just not convinced how much it's a faith that's like, I think it's the problem of disambiguating it from the kind of ethnic, not necessarily ethnic, but the cultural trappings of it, that like, even in just, the modes of communication and the attitudes towards other believers and stuff. And I mean, hey, you can do it. I mean, it's a very risky move to be the isolationist group that goes and moves in to the empire and the whore of Babylon, and like, Jacob, I'm sure, is familiar with stories. I know several people who, in like upstate New York or outside of the city, where the Jewish communities got majority control of some of the school boards and things like this, but they're not really engaged in integrating with the culture. They were making use of the system to funnel resources towards their things, and like, so I had a friend that was a Baptist pastor up in Nyack, New York, a friend of my wife, her husband, and like, he's having to like basically get some people to like the anti-Semitism was getting palpable in that situation and stuff, and it's because of like a refusal to make any attempt to like integrate or whatever. And obviously, the Orthodox are not to that degree of isolation, because in that community, there's kids.
We're talking about the most insular
Yeah,
Hasidic
they
in
don't
the
even
world.
speak English.
But your relation to that, to the ethnocentric problems that wider Orthodox groups are experiencing, like, dude, for sure. Because one, you've got the paranoia from refugees, right? Like I've spent time in these communities. So I go to some Romanian church, right? And there's like not a single convert there. And they haven't had anybody new show up in it forever. And they only speak Romanian, right? And they have been close guarded because they were escaping this Soviet oppression, right? And so they're like, we're not trying to be friendly to outsiders. And so one, it's a reaction to that, right? Two, most of these folks that have come in, are like 1-2 generations in max, right? And so like we're like in the middle of the Antiochian challenge, right, of converging peoples, right, and trying to deal with this thing that's laid out in Galatians of like, no, you don't, just because these people are circumcised and these people aren't, it doesn't mean you get to sit at 2 different tables. Peter's wrong. You all have to sit together, right? We're in the middle of that. We're very much in the middle of that, but we're thankful that these like sort of racist ortho bros and even like the old school cradle docs ethnocentric racist, like that they're there, and the priest is there to help soften their heart, right, to help soften their heart over time.
Yeah, I think, I have to say, when I came to the United States, I was absolutely shocked by how different the entire basis of relationship between various human beings was, in terms of respect and not fear, right? And I think I it's gonna sound bad, but I'm not good at saying things. I have always envied the naivete of my childhood friends who could not understand the fear that was inherent in everything that I knew prior to coming to the United States. And yeah, I understand that Americans don't understand that type of fear, but the reaction some people have, which is to be incredibly offended by people who are fearful, is itself sometimes, it just seems absurd that it's just reinforcing that fear which they find bizarre.
Yeah, it's really hard for those. As far as I can gather, when I'm spending time around, these 1 or 2 generations of Greeks that came over because of the war with Cyprus, or any of these various, Soviet refugee groups, like you can tell that they're still, they're on edge, right? They're very much on edge, and they don't know what you're dealing with. And like every new insider, could be a danger. They don't know, and they're having a hard time. But what I love, one of my favorite things has been the Middle Easterners, right, and the Antiochian tradition, right? The Lebanese, the Palestinians, the Syrians, like for them, they've been through that shit so long and for so many generations. They're like, we're glad you're here because we're here to change your heart. We don't even care, right? Like danger's everywhere. We just had to. We're like, oh well, right? It's been bad enough for so many generations of the family. We're just happy to have you here.
Okay, but you're seeing a very particular set of
Yes.
people who retained their faith as Middle Eastern Christians coming to the United States, and I would be very careful, like, I think once you get to know the community, the fearful parts of the community are fearful enough of you that they are hiding from you.
Yeah, and in a way, after 3 years with them, right? And like, I have a Palestinian godfather. I spent all kinds of times with the son. I've worked with them. I've ate with them. I've sweat with them. Like it's been beautiful to be integrated into that. But the bigger point I'm getting at is what they carried in those circles with so much oppression, and there was a tremendous amount of it, being in a Muslim occupied territory, multi-generations, is like the height of gratitude, even though things aren't going your way, right? Like, it's just like Viktor Frankl embodiedness all over the place. And like, God bless him for it.
If you're gonna play guitar, Chad, you shouldn't mute yourself.
He's protecting us from the demons.
Yeah. Well, sometimes it can be too loud, I think, and then it gets a distraction from the thing. So I can just listen to you guys and kind of like enjoy my doodling.
Strumming my heart with his finger.
I can just turn your volume lower.
But what if I want to talk then?
Well, I can turn it back up. I can still hear you. I just turn it down some.
Well, so
you know what? I want you to have the full volume.
So I was thinking about, well, first of all, you guys are talking way above my head. So I want to first say that I am grateful that we have, like, I met Michael in person. I met Jacob in person. I've not met San Antonio Sartori yet in person. Someday I hope to, but so I mean, I'm grateful that I can be friends and make friends with people that think differently, or I guess worship differently than I do, supposedly. And I don't think there's probably a whole lot of difference, only because I've seen it. Here's a weird thing. Since becoming Christian, like, I've noticed that I do, like, something, I don't know if it's just like the human tendency or whatever it is, kind of like wants to pull me into a certain tribal direction where I want to, kind of like rail against other people's worship or ideas of worship or whatever. So I'm not above it. Like, I definitely have my shortcomings when it comes to that sort of stuff. But what is that? Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, that's on my side. I'll mute.
Okay. I was like, damn, is that my mic, bro?
Demons.
But then I think about, so I was talking with CW, I don't know, last week, I think. And I was telling him that, like, I think, though I voted conservative in the American election this year, and it's the only second time I ever voted in my life because I'm a loser. I think that, in large part, I'm essentially kind of leaning more anti-political, because it just, like, at the end of the day, when if I listen to she's grating cheese, that's the sound of cheese grating. Holy cannoli!
Really hard
what
cheese.
Kind of cheese are you grating?
Petrified cheese.
It's like one of the machines where you like put the block in and
it sounds like you're grating, like you're actually grating like the driveway or something. Anyways, so recently I've been, and this is so vital for me, to have, like, I think kind of an on the ground, really tactile theology, is to kind of get in touch with history, not even like religious history, but like history of people on the ground, and where, because I don't have a lot of knowledge about my heritage, and so I am, as when I think about like the history that I've been researching over the last couple of years, like I want to if Chad had a must read books. Here's some books you must listen to or read. Undaunted Courage is one of them. What is the other one? The Frontiersman, and then this latest book I just listened to, which is called the Worst Hard Time or something like that. Those three books, if you just go listen to those books, and I think about like the things that those people lived through, and the things that they did, so that the rest of us can just kind of like live so well we can shit all over it. I just think at the end of the day, if like some earthquake like what happened in 1911, I think, no, not 1911, it was 1811, I think it was. There was an earthquake in the middle of America on the east side of the Rockies that was so massive that it, like, up in Canada, they felt it, and it happened down in basically Missouri. And if that happened today, it would just flatten us. And I just think if that were to happen, I don't think we'd talk anything about who gives a shit about Orthodox or conservatives or liberals or none of that shit. Like, we wouldn't have no time to think about that. I think about the things that happened in like Ravenbrook Basement, where Corey Ten writes about all these people of different religious backgrounds were put in a position where they had no choice but to worship together, and they did. And I just think about that, and I think, why does it take me being in Ravenbrook Basement to do that? Like, it doesn't. I mean, we do it in AA meetings all the time.
Chad,
So-
one of the worldview things that I feel like I notice be different is that it sounds to me like, and I can imagine this, in my own upbringing, right? The Baptists are pointing at the Methodists down the street. They're going to hell, right? The Methodists are pointing at the Baptists. You're going to hell, right? They're doing like, I watched that happen as part of like why I was like, screw this, right? This is ridiculous. All of you are ridiculous. And it probably sounds like I'm still like now I'm engaging in that, and I'm going like, here's the right denomination, something. From my perspective, I'm not in that anymore. That's not actually the conversation I'm having. I'm not talking about that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to talk about a tree and branches, right? And like, and the inheritance piece is only as useful as a conversation as it allows my heart to be softened enough to love my parents in the way that for 15 years I hated them so much that I didn't care about them at all. Right? So like finding some like a source and origin that puts me in touch with Christ in the fullest way has been so necessary for me, because having spent this time with, bubbling up in this Pentecostal thing, and then like searching around, going to these Protestant churches, and then deconstructing from that, ending up in like, this horrid church of nihilism and resentment, right? It was only like the brightest light that was anything that like I remember talking to a priest, and he's like, take your time coming in, because it's the end of the road, right? It's like back to like this main branch thing, right? But if it is a main branch thing, okay, unlike the hate spewing that we see so much with like new converts that are mostly like not even inquirers, and maybe have never even been to a liturgy themselves, like, we love all the glimmers of light that we see reflected all over the place. Right? And we're hoping that all those glimmers can pull together into a unity more than the heavy multiplicity that it led me down to a deconstruction path.
All that glitters is gold, my friend.
I love that song.
I mean, honestly, like I'm not really worried about the conversations that people have about like, I think, I don't know. The one thing that drives me nuts is the idea of the one true church. That thing just drives me so crazy because I just seen it, and like, okay, fine, like one true church, okay, but I also think that possibly the church that I go to is the one true church because that's where my family and I worship, and I hate the fact that I even call it a Lutheran, but I like recently, more over the last year, I'm like, fuck it, I'm a Lutheran, dude. I don't give a shit. Like, I don't really care. Like, I don't pay attention. I don't dig deep into theology in that way. Theology for me is, I'm a sloppy theologian. Like, I hold my daughter and I look at her and she smiles at me and I weep, and I hear people's stories about the real pouring out of love, and that to me that's as much theology as a guy like me needs. But
I don't want that to be a
today,
misnomer about the Orthodox tradition. Like people, some of the saints that we hold as the highest theologians are not these book people, are not well-read people. Sometimes there are these hermits, these recluses that like went spent time out in the desert, or just lived a simple life in the community and love and chasing Christ. Like that's there too, right? I think a lot of people get this idea because a lot of us, nerdy, have to read a whole bunch of shit, watch a whole bunch of shit, like and are really talky about it, and like this saint and this time frame and this history, and so here I am doing some of that. Whereas what resonates is what is true, and what is love, and what is agape love, right? And should we not represent that, right? Like look, you'll have God rest his soul, memory eternal to the former dean of St. Vlad's, like one of our big seminaries. Like when he was giving lectures after he was no longer the dean, he's like, if we are in fact the Orthodox Church. Because there has to be a challenge of there really is one gospel that Paul's getting at. It's like there's one, right? It can't change. And so the question is, are we aligned to it? Do we see it? Right? And so we are only as much Orthodox, we are only as much Israel, we are only so much the bride as we are obedient.
Yeah. I think the worry for me is when each of us are unwilling to examine where each of us personally are falling short. And I think that because I know I'm riddled with these kinds of shortcomings, and the guys I care about, people I meet here on the internet and stuff, like, they have these pains going on within themselves that they want to project it onto others, like I do sometimes, and they're unwilling to actually examine their own shortcomings. I think, man, the problem ain't them, dude. The problem ain't them.
I think
Really.
there's a big problem, I think, with the lack of rootedness, and then when there's this lack of rootedness. And you can choose your own identity, and it's like, it's admirable that people are turning to religion, to Christianity, and in that regard, seeking what is supposed to be the oldest, there, and it's been around the longest, so that's a good choice. I think that comes with a sense of insecurity, though, because it's not, especially for the people who are doing it that way. And it's great that they go online, do the work, and then if they're actually going, hopefully, and they get into a community or welcome, that's amazing. But it's still, there is a little bit of an insecurity that comes with that, where it's your choice. Like, what differentiates that in some sense from your choice to identify as some other gender or whatever? Like that. I mean, there's a big problem with that. You roots, like, take a long time to develop, and you're supposed to have been planted somewhere and you weren't, and that's like, whatever, a problem of the whole generation. So So like, and then and when I can remember that and stuff, then it helps me to obviously be more gracious in the way that I interact with other people. It is a little frustrating, like the dunks, because I can make the most dunks on evangelicalism. I know how several varieties of sausages are made. I've been behind a lot of scenes, uh, but it's still like it's still doing a lot of good, I think, and it does have an ability. If there's a crisis mode, like if a crisis happens tomorrow, there's going to be a lot of those evangelical churches are going to be doing a heck of a lot of good. And I don't have any doubt that like Michael's church and the other Orthodox churches and Catholic churches won't either. But I mean, in this city and a lot of places in America, the evangelical churches are equipped to do a lot of good in a crisis. I wish they would. Part of the goal and like what I was trying to get across in writing my book is to say, hey, right now we're still in the 7 years of abundance. We need to be a little bit more strategic about what we're doing with these resources while we have them in preparing for those lean years.
Yeah, because don't forget, we're all sausages. That's the thing. You said you know how all of these different sausages are made. Yeah, but we forget how we sausages are made, each of us, and that's why I point to history, because look at those folks. What is this?
Oh, so this is whenever there's discussions about beauty, I remember this picture. I don't know how to get that stupid window out of there. No, that stupid hand. So, like I remember I saw this, and like so I've never met this guy in person. He went to the same Bible college I did, and he like friend requests everybody on Facebook that he sees who has the college, like any connection to it. And he's like super friendly guy. He's like one of those good old timey gospel singers. So he puts like a video of himself singing "Happy Birthday" on your timeline every year, like and he's a widower, and like obviously like this woman is not conventional. She's not good to look at. She's gone through trauma. It was cancer, I believe. Lost her eye and some of her bones in her face. Not good to look at. But like the way that I see this guy talk about and communicate and see beauty, that's the beauty of a human being made in the image of God, and it cannot, like the ravages of this world and stuff cannot diminish that beauty, and it becomes more enhanced when people love each other, and like in a marriage like that, but also the way we love other people. And so
you're gonna find that in like St. Chrysostom, right? You're gonna find that deeply expressed, right, about on marriage and like husbands how to consider your wives, and like the love that is the more beautiful thing than your aesthetic, problems of prioritizing that where you shouldn't, right? But you can't end up in the Lizzo problem either. Okay. Right. And so there is a tension, there's a both anding, right? Where the West widely has landed in this area. And like I used to preach, it's like, it doesn't matter what you look like, blah, 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 right? It's bullshit. It's bullshit. Right? Like, it doesn't matter if I make my bed. It doesn't matter if I keep my place nice. It doesn't matter how this looks. It's all subjective. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. That's bullshit too.
Well, fine. That's fine. Yeah. But like,
well, there's a both. There's a both and.
Yeah, but there's
it's not a both and though, because the thing is that beauty, even Lizzo or whatever, like the people that say stuff, they're not lying. They don't know what parts of the thing they're right about. They're wrong about some parts of it, and they're right about others.
Exactly.
But we don't.
Yeah,
But it's it's only if we have having the eyes to see is the most important thing. And when we focus on like these grand examples of the thing and use that as the example to express
Well, here's a specific example in my life.
beauty.
I don't just accept that my parents have been grotesquely overweight. Right? I can't just accept that. I care about their health. Right? I care about their relation to each other because it matters. It matters, right?
Well,
Like my dad has been type 2 diabetic for like 15 years now and hasn't dealt with
now
it.
you're getting there.
Right?
Well,
And like you can't just go, well, my heart's in the right place. It doesn't matter what I do with my body. Right? The Gerard quote that I was sent earlier. Nobody's trying to be a saint, but everybody's trying to lose weight. Right?
well, okay. So I was at a job site this week. This dude is like, I don't know, 80 years old. It's his house I'm working on. Maybe 70. I don't know. Whatever. He's an old fuck. And I say that lovingly. Not really. But I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. Anyways, he's a very old dude. And I'm working on his bathroom. And I'm making this cut with my side grinder. And he's sitting in the garage watching me. And at the end of the day, he comes up to me and he says, you know, have you ever heard of safety glasses? And, because, you know, I lost my vision in my one eye and, you know, you should probably wear safety glasses. And I didn't say anything. But, like, there's a million things I wanted to say. Like, you think I've never heard of safety glasses before? I mean, come on, dude. Like, or it's like when, like, smokers. You know, smoking is really bad for you. It kills you. It's like, as I'm smoking, and I've been smoking for 15 years or whatever. It's like, yeah, no shit. Smoking is unhealthy for me. Like, that's the thing. It's like, and you said your dad's a type 2 diabetic for 15 years. You think he's stupid? You think he doesn't know that?
No, he's not stupid. He's rebellious.
Well,
okay,
that's his problem.
And he's my father.
Yeah.
Right. And God willing, the grandfather to my kids. Right. Mm-hmm. And so it matters. It matters. Okay. Now, if I come down too harshly on him, that's wrong. Right. If I go full judgment and truth without mercy and grace, right, then like we're just gonna like knock it off. Right.
It's sometimes I just think
like we are. I
understand this.
I'm sorry,
my dad
guys,
recently.
Like, there's a Western problem here that drives me nuts, and I am the perpetrator of so much of it too, where like a serious critique about simple problems cannot be taken on. Like the wider West, a little bit of judgment is eked out, and everybody has a conniption fit. Everybody falls apart with a little bit of judgment. Now, I'm not casting that guy at you guys.
Oh, so that's boomerality. That's boomerality.
Yeah, it sure is. It sure is.
Okay, I mean, I'm okay with the judgment of others, but like at the same time, I'm also like, be careful what you ask for too, because like my father and I had a recent falling out over the last year, and then, and all I wanted, and especially after having my daughter, because I had all these like new things crop up, like that I wasn't aware that I was resentful at. You know, like, why the fuck weren't you there, dude? Like, what the fuck? Yeah. You know, and then he just couldn't see it, and we had this falling out, and all I wanted him to do was recognize where he's fallen short, you know, and it just pissed me off so much, and it was like eating me alive, dude, and then just a couple weeks ago. We got to talking on the phone, and he like tells me that somebody in his life told him that I don't give a shit about your opinions. Nobody cares about your opinions. Grow the fuck up, get a job, stop being an asshole, and you fucked your whole life up. And he heard it, right? And he tells me this, And it fucking killed me to hear it, dude. And all I wanted to do was hear him say it. It's like, be careful what you ask for, because the things that you think you want, you probably don't. Because if you get them, man, you might not know how to handle
best,
it.
okay,
You know,
at our best, like the actual best is to ask for a fullness of truth and judgment and a fullness of grace and mercy.
yeah.
Okay, I want to tell this story. I had a cousin who lived in Vegas, and he was grossly overweight. And my parents went and visited him. And when they came back, my mom was talking about how, so they were sleeping at his apartment. And she was talking about how all night he was snoring very loudly and he would stop breathing. And she said she couldn't sleep all night. She didn't know what to do, right? And a few months, or maybe it was a year or so later, he died in his sleep, right? Suffocated to death. And my mom, this has been like 10, 15 years now, still like it still gnaws at her, because this was like one of her first nephews. She remembers him as a baby. And she wonders what she could have said, right? She didn't say anything because, of course, he knew he was overweight. And he knew it was dangerous. He was a pharmacist. He was a doctor, right? And so, like, this is where, for me, like, the serenity prayer is just a constant mantra, right? Like, and sometimes there's nothing you can do. And sometimes there are things you can do. And the hardest thing is to know the difference.
Yep.
So I think Jonathan offering a critique to evangelicals about their houses of worship is something they can do, isn't cruel, right, and is reasonable. Right? So, and like to my dad, me saying something, right, rather than just accepting it, right, but I do so with love. Like, Dad, I care about you being around. I care about you living, right, and I want you to be here when I have kids, God willing, right. Take care of this problem, right. And like here, so he's like eating, as carnivore as he can now. He still struggles with portion control stuff, right, but he's like doing better in some ways. Like, we really thought we were going to lose him 2 years ago, but he's doing better. He cares, but the reason he cares was not because I like came down with him like harsh judgments, because I loved him, even though it was truth that stung. Also, that hurt was a little painful, right? It had to be bold.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like to talk about these things with care and also there's a price to pay for the responsibilities that you hoist upon your shoulders. So, I think it's appropriate to offer these kinds of critiques when it's appropriate. I probably am a millennial boomer of sorts. Where the hell did Michael go? We can't have a stream without Michael Satori here. What is happening?
I think he's backstage. Since Luke is in the comments, I have to channel him. Those damn infernalists who believe people go to hell are the only people who will go to hell. And goddamn all of them.
Well, I'll just tell you what some of these weird AA people say. Well, only religious people believe in hell. And alcoholics been there.
Yeah.
But whatever, it doesn't matter.
No, gosh, shit. One of my best friends, who has really been on this journey with me, coming out of the space that I was in. We worked together for like 7 years. He was a project manager, I was a web developer, but we both were kind of had each other's backs all the time and have lunch together and all this. And I moved away, but we still kind of kept close. I have this like full road to Damascus turnaround thing, and he hangs in there with me, with discussions. And his journey has been different than mine, where he landed in AA, right? And like got real deep in. Chad, you remind me so much of him. Like it's unbelievable how much you remind me of him. Like the temperament that the two of you guys have, and some of the things you talk about is just like on point. And I have so much appreciation because you're right. Like the people that have turned to that, they're like, yeah, I've seen hell, right? And like the people that made this AA thing, like they're working with Jung and going, we need something here. We need help here, or that they're taking influence from his work. But his work, at its best, was only a representation of the path of catechesis in the church, right? That bring you back to Christ, and that was the only transcendence that could, deliver you from these demons, right? Deliver you from the alcoholism, deliver you from whatever addiction thing that you're dealing with, right? And so you're right, like in a lot of ways, and I mean this in a lot of ways. And I think this wouldn't be uncommon to hear said within Orthodox circles. The most faithful, lineage tradition in the United States or the Greater West is like the Alcoholics Anonymous group. They get it, man. Now that's oversimplifying. But like, I'm not far off. I'm not far off from what you would hear.
So what is it? All it is this: if you found yourself backed into a corner and you are sick of suffering and you have no other options because whatever you feel like you don't have any other options, whatever the thing is, you're kind of willing to do whatever, and all you end up doing is participating in a process that has you look really deeply and honestly at yourself in a way that hurts, and then has you seek a God that, and it's weird too because what it asks you to do is to set aside the things you think you know already.
Yes.
And to attain a new attitude.
Yeah.
And what I mean
mortification
by new is
of the flesh,
one you haven't had yet, and and even if that means like the ideas that you currently have about God. Oftentimes, dude, religious people and thinky-talky people have a great difficulty in taking the steps because they think we already know.
Absolutely.
And it sucks, dude, because like you'll see a guy who like is devout and all this stuff, and he may be 100% right, but he's unwilling to see things differently, and he'll just suffer to death, pointlessly suffer, potentially.
Chad, I gotta step away for a second, but same page. And look, what AA is doing is an inheritance of exorcism, as far as I'm concerned, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. And
yeah, I mean, I think that all religious traditions of sorts offer that. That'd be my guess. I mean, I don't know a lot about a lot of different ones, but I mean, it's about assuming a different posture, and basically it's rooted in humility, which is hard for people. I know it's not hard for Jacob, but it's really hard for me because I am not a humble person at all.
So when I finished my one of my practicums, my boss gave me a card and some gifts, and she wrote in the card, Jacob, you're just so humble. And I was like, is she being sarcastic? I was like, no, she can't actually mean this. She must be sarcastic. Um, and I don't know. It's like sometimes there are some things you just can't hear, like, and I don't know how. I mean, I still don't know what to do with that card.
Well, I would talk more about humility, but there's not enough people here to do it, so we probably, we probably shouldn't. Luke Thompson says, Chad, I already know all this. What? Then what? Well, I don't know what to tell you, buddy. What I would recommend for everybody that I know, all of humanity, a couple things. Read those 3 books I pointed out because they give a perspective. Because I honestly think like the lives of people, not just saints, but the lives of people that suffered tremendously and gave their blood so that you can like shit on the things that you have. There's so much wisdom in hearing about people's lives that it's incredible. So there's that. That's one thing. The other thing I would say is I would recommend a 4th and a 5th step to anybody who's willing and brave enough to do it, and honest and do it honestly. I would recommend those things for real because they just do something. They offer an entirely different perspective, and that's where a new attitude comes from. Now, I might be a bad example of this because I'm kind of a dickhead sometimes. So, but there's a reason why I continue to stay Chad the alcoholic, and not just Chad the girl dad, because I won't be able to remain Chad the girl dad on my own knowledge, on my own power. I just can't do it. And
Ron, I'm not the one running this, unfortunately, and Sartori his computer crashed. He's got to do it. I can't let you in. Sorry. If I was running it, I would let you in.
is he in the back? He's in the. Ron's in the back stage, huh? He's in the green room.
He is in the green
doob.
And Mark Lefebvre's stream starts in like 15 minutes.
Who gives a shit?
I do.
I'm just kidding. I was just kidding. But not only that, I think isn't Rigel having an event today where music is being played? Rigel's the pianist, the jazz pianist who is an ortho dude, but not an ortho bro. Like he's an ortho bud. He's the guy that was in Orthodox for 13 years before all the.
There's a lot of new people. I didn't know Denise either. That's good.
Denise, if I said something to offend you, I'm sorry. I thought it was ironic when she made the statement about Satanists because it sounded very satanic, and it's okay. We take turns. None of us are perfect. Hello, Mr. Ron.
Hey, what's up, dude? I like the mask. It's been a while.
Thanks, man. You're up, dude. You're up. What's up?
All right. So, my unprofessional opinion is AA is effective exorcism, and exorcism is simply creating a stable spiritual life within a person. And AA does it without Jesus if you want. It's basically forming a simple pattern that is non-destructive, and it's good, to be honest. The more I haven't read the big book yet, and I need to, because it it sounds like a Catholic exorcism, really. It's, and I'm not being sarcastic, because in Catholicism, they'll make you, one, get a physical checkup, see what kind of biochemical stuff might be out of whack, to see if that's causing you to hear voices or whatnot. And also just make sure you can endure the procedure, the emotional trauma. Then they will send you to a psychologist to see if you just have some sort of profound emotional wounds that can be healed that way. And then if the things are still talking to you or whatever, then they'll just do like a laundry list of what kind of crazy are you into that you should stop, and work with you for that. And the most effective thing is forgiveness, which sounds like in AA, when you go back and when possible, right the wrongs and just confess that you were wrong.
Yeah.
Own-
Well, the AA process is way more simple than all that stuff. We would never send anybody to a therapist or a doctor or anything
Yeah.
like that. I mean, you might have like if I go to my sponsor or whatever, and I have like some crazy shit going on inside me, he might be like, "Bro, go get some professional help." But
Right.
it's like all we do is very simple. You identify the idol that you're worshiping,
Oh,
and you say that I can't turn away from it on my own power. I need God's help,
okay.
whatever that is.
Right.
I can't seem to manage. Well, like part of the first step is my life became unmanageable. That's kind of like, have you ever been in a fit of rage and then just turned it off and became joyful? Like that's unmanageable. I've never done it.
Right.
So like, it's just admitting that. Like I don't have the power to change how I feel exactly, perfectly, and it's just admitting that, and then saying like, and when I'm caught up in that spiritual illness, all sorts of insane things can happen. Like I could take a drink again. Like that's ridiculous.
Right.
Which is the most insane thing I've ever done, is taking a drink when I knew damn well where it was going to lead. And then and then you move into a third step where I offer my will and my life over the care of God as I understand Him, which is my thoughts and my actions, and just take the suggestions of somebody more wise than I am, and then I write down some stuff in an inventory where I'm just really honest about how I've felt people have harmed me and the wrongs I've done to others, and then I get a different perspective on those things, like an entirely different, just turns it on its head completely, where I can see things completely different and more honest. And then I tell that to somebody, and then I seek God further, and then I ask God to remove the shit within me that I find objectionable. And then I make amends for the harms that I've done to others, and then I continue to seek God and take inventory. Like it's really simple inventory stuff. Continue to pray, and then try to help other people. That's it. That's all it is. It's really simple.
In Catholicism, when I listen to these exorcists, they go, a good confession is better than any exorcism. I'm sorry.
Am I losing
Sorry?
Is it you or me who's fading?
No, Ron's
What was
connection
that?
is never that great.
Is there
Okay,
a problem
okay.
with my audio?
Yeah, you've been kind of droiding on us.
You need an exorcist, bro.
Hold on. Let me. Oh, all right. Let's see what I can do. I don't need an exorcist. I like better. Let me try something here.
There's one thing that
Jacob, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. You're probably lagging behind a little bit. There's one thing that I want to say before I go, but it's something that I've discovered recently that like I think sometimes that um, feeling bad is the default. Like, and it's normal and it's okay. You're not always going to feel good. Like, cause I can be swimming in spiritual action, like, and earnestly, and like still hold my daughter and like be joyful and filled with like love and joy that I've never felt before, and still have like this darkness sometimes within me. And I think that's just normal. And I think we have to make peace with the fact that sometimes that's just the way shit is, and it's gonna be okay. You know?
You need your full range
Right.
of human emotions. Being human includes being sad and being angry and being and uh, I like to compare it to cancer cells, right? You need your brain cells in your brain and you need your heart muscles in your heart, but cancer is when you start growing heart muscle cells in your brain and you start growing brain cells in your heart, and that's metastatic cancer is when things are not in their growing in their right place.
Yeah. Well, and you have to realize that you're not your thoughts. You just have them. You know? I mean, that's yeah, dude. I mean, even Jesus dealt with this stuff, I think. You know? Like even Jesus had his 40 days in the wilderness where he had to deal with temptation, and I think that's what kind of those low spots are just sometimes. And if like that's why I can't imagine that there is no God, because if there is no God, I'm totally fucked. You know, because that just and it doesn't make any sense to me either. The more that you that
Right. Yeah.
So what does this guy say? Jason asked, Chad, do you find confession or forgiveness hardest for people in AA? No, I just think it's hard for people. Um, yeah, I don't know how to explain that.
I'm guessing you're probably going to disagree with this, Chad, but I find AA to be strong medicine, and I think just like any sort of strong medicine, um, if you give the wrong medicine to the wrong person, it's going to destroy them.
That's
And
true. I agree.
and there are people who have a very hard time ever looking at how they're wrong and when they're wrong. And those are the people who are more likely to fall into something like alcoholism. And for those people, it's really, really important to make them do those steps of a brutal inventory. There are also people who are neurotic, and those neurotic people um, are the opposite of alcoholics. Um, I have to say, my doctor once told me I'm supposed to have half a glass of wine every night. I couldn't do it. I could not do it.
Why, you don't like to drink or what?
I'm fine drinking with other people around. I can't
Oh,
drink by
sure.
myself
Okay, yeah.
because I hate myself when I drink.
Yeah. Yeah, so,
Um,
yeah.
and like there are people who are hypercritical, and if you make them try to do a brutal inventory of themselves, they will destroy themselves.
I agree. I agree. And I think that's why, like, these kinds of things can't make anybody do it. First of all, I would never want to make anybody do them. But I think they do work for people who are kind of. It's like the idea of it's the last house on the block. You know, it's like it's an act of desperation, and desperate means to be in a position that's hopeless and impossible to deal with. So it's like, but yeah, I mean, I think there are people that can, and that's also why a sponsor is so helpful. And a sponsor is somebody who has done the thing before, and they're familiar with the literature and how to do the process, and they are very familiar with how to love well. And if you don't have good guidance in a process like that, I don't care who you are. If you don't have good guidance in it, you're fucked. Because you'll only look at it as a destructive process when it was never meant to be destructive. It was supposed to be constructive. And so yeah, forgiveness or confession. Well, the confession comes first. That's how I've experienced it. Well, no, that's not true. There's a portion in the fourth step, and I didn't even know about this until I was like, I don't know, 4 years sober. And I got a new sponsor. My sponsor showed me this portion in the fourth step that blew my mind, and that did require forgiveness. But I don't know if I know what you mean by forgiveness. But it required setting down the things I think I know about the situation and looking at it from a different point of view. And that was probably the road to forgiveness. And it basically looks like this. It's something like this. If my sponsor asked me if he felt like there was any time where I actually harmed somebody, when I was harming them, was I with God when I was doing that? Like, did I have God consciousness? Right? Was I in the presence of God in a way that was proper, I guess? And I was like, well, no. And so what we came to the understanding that, yeah, any time that I've harmed somebody, I was cut off from God. And so if that was true, which I believed it was, then that means anytime anybody's ever harmed me, they too are cut off from God. And that's why we need God. And and it doesn't let them off the hook. It just sees things. It allows you to see things through a more, I think, merciful lens. So yeah, but it's hard. It's fucking hard, dude.
Okay, gentlemen, I think I am going to say good day. Be well. Do good things. Take care of your daughter.
Good to see you. My wife just got home. Perfect timing.
Later, peeps.
Toodles. We're going to have Michael's gorgeous face up here smiling at everybody. Bye, everybody.
Hi, Michael. We're going to talk about TV etiquette and security. Hi, I'm Ron Copperman. I work for a non-disclosed company that's going to educate you about...
How did that happen? Did somebody play praise and worship music?
I think Ron brought him in.
Oh, wow. There's the
Is that what you meant by green room? My God.
Well... Yeah.
Ron, did you how much of any of this have you caught so far?
Chad, with we were talking about AA and similarities to exorcism in Catholicism and the nature of forgiveness, and the steps of becoming free, and what all that entails, and so that's where I was at.
Yeah. So our priest, he gives this story where he met a Catholic. He was on a plane. He just happened to be sitting, next to this Catholic priest, who professionally like an exorcist. He'd just be called
Yeah.
to go places to do exorcisms. And so he's asking me, like, what do you do? And so, again, I think he's got like 20 years doing it. Basically, he had to go back to like the oldest forms of catechism that I don't know what everybody does, but this particular guy went to the oldest forms of catechism in the church, right? Like pre 1054, and just takes them through that. Just takes them through this long, slow catechesis in order to, exercise these people. And the steps of what's going on there, it's like, yeah, of course that's what AA is doing, because of course that's what would be effective. It's the only thing that could be. Ron's bugging out on me.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ron. Super lag.
Yep. Well,
Here we go.
Yeah, probably better.
We're back. So the last thing I heard was that you said he took them through catechesis. Was that Orthodox?
Yeah. Well, you could think pre-schism catechism.
Right.
So he just it goes way back into the oldest form of the catechism that he could get his hands on, and just takes these mental institute demon possessed people and just takes them through. And usually they would call them, like these institutes would call them, because they were just desperate. Like the drugs, the processes, like everything that they tried, just wasn't enough, and they're just desperate. And so they're like, I guess let's try a priest. Who knows? It's not going to hurt anything at this point.
Right. Have you guys had much encounter, and I don't even know what you believe in, with like outside entities in conjunction with being a good Catholic or Orthodox or just Protestant, to get rid of the junk that sometimes you need to get rid of outside entities and influences? Is that guys
just a little bit more specific?
Yeah, just demons. You guys ever have to just deal with them? Like every once in a while, there's an actual demon in the house that you got to deal with.
So I think the way we would talk about it is that you cannot remove your positioning in relation to it, right? So it is both a matter of the heart and I have to smash the physical idol. Both things are true at the same time.
Oh, that's interesting. I like that. I'm listening. No, I like that. Yeah, because that to me sounds like exorcism.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just a different verbiage, but that's pretty effective. Can you repeat that one more time? I like that.
Yeah. So you both have. You have to circumcise your heart, and you have to smash the physical.
Right. I like that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's but I do a lot of stuff in the past with youth jail, and drug support groups. Nothing professional or anything like that. And once in a while, we'll just pull the trigger and pray and tell stuff to leave people. Nothing crazy, but just, and I've seen it, and people are going like, "What happened there?" And it's not like exorcism like you see on TV or in the movies. It's just more people going, "I felt something leave, and I feel better."
Yeah.
And, okay. But I also like more so the process of you identify your idol and you smash it and you clean your room. That way, I don't have to do anything. You have agency over your life, and that way, if and when it tries to come back, you can tell it how. Just no, there's no room in the end. And
well, so let's say you got like a kid doing drugs, Right. Like you may have to flush the meth down the toilet. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That usually is smashing an idol or
Yeah.
flushing the toilet. Oh,
That's
that's
not going
funny.
to. This is not going to stop them. That's not going to stop like what's going on in their heart, but it might give them an opportunity to deal with it rather than just having it there.
Oh,
waiting.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, Michael, why baseball? I like it,
This
but
is Orthodox baseball.
this is
It's
Orthodox baseball.
yeah. It's old, and they play by the old rules.
Okay. Now, so this is ortho
None of
ball.
that. Yeah, none of that newfangled MLB nonsense
Okay.
with those home runs and whatnot.
No gloves for you, buddy.
No.
Well, so
Okay.
so then, here's a relation for that, Sartori. Whatever of the inheritance that Melchizedek had, right? So that's if the Orthodox are right, and there's a continued line, right, where there's an obedience and a looking at a triune God, right? So this is one continuous line, pre-incarnation, post-incarnation, but one continuous line, right? Those who are obedient to the memra, the word of the Lord, the Son, right, in order to bring them to the Father. Okay. So the practices that they have, right, including the words that they keep around, or the art that they keep around, or what have you, right, that were time tested in order to help bring you, and bring your attention in all the ways, the smells, bells, words, all of it, rotation, sounds. It can't possibly be trivial, right? Now, it's not to say that other things can't be incorporated, but you would have to be especially careful on what is to observe what might go wrong as a result. And if we're in the middle of a Horus Babylon, we have to be like incredibly skeptical.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not. Skepticism hasn't done me well. Trust has, and faith has. So my children are literally screaming, so I probably need to leave.
All right, sir.
But yeah, well, it's been a good talk. Hit me up sometime, and
Yeah, let's do it for lunch.
Okay. All right. Adios.
Later.